And I had been trying to be abundant and to be expansive and get into the right energy flow, but I was just gripping so tight. And ultimately, what I was gripping so tightly to was, if I am not an entrepreneur who is wealthy and successful, people won't love me.
What up, fam? Welcome to another episode of Life Beyond the Game. Oh, if you're tuning in, you are in for a treat. It's been a long time coming. You know, with the redirection of this podcast and the relaunch of Life Beyond the Game, it's been really trying to focus on bringing on elite athletes and really speaking to the challenges of the identity shift and the big ego death that takes place when you have to let go of everything that you ever worked for, everything that you ever dreamed of, and everything that you identify with. And that is not something that just athletes face. You know, that shows up in all areas of our society and culture. And so many people face those challenges. And that's why I'm really excited when I was speaking with my wife, Sarah, and I wanted to share with all of you her journey that she's been on, because it's been a powerful one. And she's gone through her own massive identity shift, like most of us have over the last 3 years. And she's one of the most incredible entrepreneurs I've ever met. And one of my favorite things about our relationship early on was our ability to connect over business. And I was just starting off on my business journey, so I really learned a lot. She became somewhat of a mentor and confidant in business. And when I met her, she had like multiple businesses on the go, successful businesses. She's had successful 7-figure exits, selling some of her businesses. And she's just what I would say is a serial entrepreneur. It's in her blood. You know, a lot of people nowadays, there's a lot of opportunity to create businesses and, you know, be an influencer or like solo business creator, like, and a lot of people call themselves entrepreneurs, but Sarah, in her blood, she is purebred entrepreneur and just an incredible leader. And she, at the beginning of the pandemic, when I first met her, had this vision of changing the world through a technology platform to help connect employers and employees globally and fully remote, and really massive dream for her business, Growmotely. And what a journey it has been. She, on the show, will share with you more about that journey and what she went through, facing the challenges of things not clicking and it not working and it not being in alignment anymore, and all the lessons that come with that. Eventually coming to an opportunity of really not feeling super called to sit behind a desk all day and build businesses. She's still an entrepreneur at heart, but the idea of going for $1 billion unicorn company that's funded, which, you know, I'm so proud of her, the courage it takes to even just go for a dream like that. And then, you know, the fall from the top and all the challenges and lessons and how to alchemize them. And we, in this episode, obviously she's my wife, my partner, my lover, my baby's mama, all the things. And so this episode, you guys should just buckle up. We start off with Sarah's journey, but we definitely get into a lot of behind the scenes stuff of our relationship, how we connect. And I think it's just a really, really beautiful conversation. We also talk about our property, Haven, for the first time publicly. It's a retreat center / community / regenerative farm that we're launching 90 minutes outside of Austin. That is going to be open for private retreats and a lot of other really cool things that are coming online very, very soon. And we'll put a link in the show notes if you want to join our Telegram channel that's specifically for Haven, so you can stay up to date on all the things we're doing out there. And we're really, really passionate about building community and facilitating this journey of reconnecting back with nature. All right, I'm talking too much. I think you guys are just going to really love this episode with my wife, Sarah Hawley. Before we get started, though, I want to share how passionate I am about community. I truly believe community is the currency of the future. It's what we're really all after. We feel disconnected from ourselves. We feel disconnected from our work. We feel disconnected from our partners, our relationships, nature. At the very least, you might be connected to all those things, but I promise you, at some level, you're disconnected from nature. And when you're disconnected from nature, it's really hard to remember where we came from and what we are and who we are. And this reality that we live in, filled with so many distractions and so much opportunity and so many things to chase and fill that void within our heart that we all feel on some level. What we're really after is community. What we're really after is connection. What we're really after is an opportunity to remember the truth of who we are. And I love being out in nature, cultivating community, and redefining what it means to be a leader. And that's what we'll be doing this year through the Heart Collective. There's so much more I want to share. Holy cow. There's a link in the show notes. Go to theheartcollective.com to learn more. But the gist of it is we're calling in 40 founding members. These members are high impact, influential change makers, business leaders, entrepreneurs, influential visionaries, individuals who have a vision on their heart to make a more beautiful world a reality and to usher in a new paradigm of leadership where we lead from the heart and implement and integrate the energy of the heart into the creations that we make and that we have, the people that we lead, the cultures that we build, and imagine the ripples that will be sent out into the world as these 40 incredible humans, these heart-centered leaders doing big things in the world come together to support one another and anchoring in this higher frequency of love, presence, connection, compassion. It takes courage. It takes courage. You don't have to do it alone. We're going to build this community. We're going to build the foundation. And this is just the beginning. The way we facilitate, you can't just build community because you want to. That's one thing I found. You have to go through some type of experiential process. And the way we're cultivating is what I'm really excited about. And this is what's so unique about the Heart Collective. The way we're cultivating these unbreakable bonds within our community is through an experiential process, which is what we're going to facilitate on a whitewater rafting wilderness expedition this summer. We have 2 permits, 20 spots each. It's a truly magical experience out there. I've been facilitating these last few years. And out of all the medicine work I've done, all of the deep psychological work, all the healing, all the yoga, all the gatherings and summits, all the information, nothing compares to being out on this river. And I'm looking forward to meeting the 40 people that are going to share this experience with me and co-create and build the foundation for this community that's going to have a massive impact in the world moving forward. If you feel the call in your heart, tugging on your heartstrings, and you want to learn more, check out, there's a link in the show notes, heartcollective.com. You can send an application. You can reach out to me directly. I love y'all. You guys are in for a treat with this show. Enjoy this episode with my wife, my partner, my confidant, my baby's mama, Luca. Luca loves you so much. I love you so much. And I'm really grateful for you opening your heart and sharing your story in such a beautiful way. I'll talk to y'all soon. If you enjoy the show and you don't want to miss the upcoming episodes, make sure you follow, subscribe, do all of that jazz. If you want to support the show, leave a 5-star review. That really, really does help get the show to more people. And if somebody comes up in your mind as you're listening to this show, you're like, oh man, I need to share this with this person. Do it right when it comes into your awareness. Click that little link, share it with them. And there's a lot of inspiring energy and story in this episode. It's really juicy. Excited to hear what y'all think. And all right, I'm done talking. Enjoy. Peace. We're here.
Yeah.
How are you?
I am so good.
Oh,
a little bit tired.
Why is that?
Luca ate, I think, 7 cuties, the little mandarins, overnight. So that required me to get out of bed a couple of times to feed him.
It's like every night.
Yeah.
It's a habit.
No, but
Little guy likes eating.
He does, but
Yeah.
it was like 3 times last night, so I'm a bit more tired than usual.
How you dealing with that sleep disruption?
It's tough. Yeah. It's real. It's been like 2.5 years now since I've had like consistent good night's sleeps.
You're crushing it though.
I didn't sleep in my pregnancy well after the first trimester either. So
yeah, you're crushing it.
It is getting a lot better, but sleep deprivation is real. And I think when I'm in my real low points, it's like focus on that as the number one thing to regenerate my life force.
Sleep is the most important thing.
Yeah.
It's fascinating the human body's and organism's capacity to adjust, because just like waking up one time during the night can sleep up especially where you're like in the sleep cycle. If you sleep when you're like deep sleep, and get woken up out of it, it's like, and to do that multiple times a night and then be able to function.
That's been my life the last few years.
How you doing without coffee?
That's also hard because that's what I've been using to help myself function.
Yeah.
How many days? I think we're 5 days in, right?
Yeah, we're doing a detox cleanse. A lot of people are doing these parasite cleanses, and our friend Megan shared with us. I've been dealing with like leaky gut since my playing days, and all the anti-inflammatory medications that rip the stomach lining. But then talking to Megan, she's learning a lot about this, and what I'm realizing is all the glyphosate in our food and all the non-actual dense nutrient. We don't have the nutrients that our body needs in the food, even the organic, healthy foods that we have. And it's really quite daunting and overwhelming to understand how much poison and glyphosate's in everything. And glyphosate, if you don't know, is like Roundup. It's like weed killer that they put on our crops. And when that gets into our system and we have leaky gut, that those toxins, there's a natural system, the lymph system in the body that brings those toxins through the liver and the kidneys and cleans the body and the organism. And when you have leaky gut and you don't absorb the right nutrients, you're not getting the actual nutrients, and there's a lot of toxins in your body, especially in your diet. It goes into the blood, overwhelms the lymph system, goes into the kidneys and the liver. And I've been dealing with like some fungus type stuff in my skin since my playing days, like some ringworm stuff that gets flared up. And I never really know what it is. And it just kind of flares up when I get sweaty, but it's always kind of been there. And what she was saying, and that the skin is like the second, I don't know if it's the kidneys or the livers, which one kind of filters the blood, one of those. But the skin acts as the second kidney or liver. And if there's the kidneys.
Blood, yeah.
So the kidney, so there's too much toxins in my body's not able to get rid of them. The skin acts as the second kidney to get rid of those toxins, which shows up as like fungal infections on the skin, which is really fascinating. So all of it's connected.
Mm-hmm.
And so she was telling me about this cleanse. And then there's the whole thing with parasites as well, that we all have parasites within us. Just like, if you talk about the microbiome and all these different organisms, like it makes sense that there's other things that are living within us.
Mm-hmm.
And we've had some friends that have had some pretty gnarly experiences of some big, like it grosses me out even like talking about it.
I love it.
Oh man, like non-consensual, like showing pictures of parasites in stool is like, oh, I can like feel it in my body. It's like, oh, and I know that thinking about those things in my body is like intense. So anyways, all that being said, we decided to do this cleanse. I'm really grateful that we're doing it together, because the first couple of days I realized how much I'm a big snacker and how much I was like pulling for food and like unconsciously, and being like, oh, I can't eat that. I can't eat that. So basically we're going on this really clean diet, organic fruits and vegetables, pretty much. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we're doing. And we started like 5 days ago, and we do a 10-day prep period, getting the body like really cleansed. And then there's these supplements that you take during the next 10 that are supposed to like kill off the parasites. And I'll tell you what, I have never felt better. I'm starting to really feel the cleansing, because I deal with pain in my body a lot from football, and I've just lived with that. And when I wake up in pain, like I can notice like when I eat higher inflammatory foods, like it really shows up in my body. But then it's like it's like the thing that people don't know what feeling good feels like. So then they don't have anything to compare it to. So like our natural standard American diet, people are just really unhealthy. They don't know what feeling good feels like. But how many layers to that is there?
The biggest conversation I've been having with myself the last few days is like, there is no way I'm giving up coffee. No way. Like as soon as this cleanse is over, I will be drinking coffee again. And then there's this other voice that's like, I wonder if you're actually going to give up coffee. And I'm like, because I do feel good in my physical body. Like I have no bloating. I have no like all the stuff that comes with like digestive dysfunction, like wind or whatever, like cramping. I'm none of that.
Wind, is that farts?
Yeah.
Is that like the polite way of saying farts?
It's a polite Australian way.
It's an Aussie thing. So the thing with me and Sarah is anytime she says something that's Aussie that we don't, it's like a cultural thing that we don't have in America. I'm like, what does that mean?
I feel like my grandma would have said that.
I just always call her out. It's like rubbish. She calls trash rubbish. I mean, that's an obvious one, I think. But it's like, what are you talking about with some of this stuff? So I'm glad we cleared that up.
Anyway, I don't have the farts. I don't have like, any bloating, cramping, any of that really. And so, my physical body feels really good and is starting to feel really good. I had a headache the first day, so that wasn't fun. But there is like a full-on mental, emotional situation going on around coffee for me. And like very much less so food, but it does come up a little bit. And I think mainly because there's no coffee. And then there's also no opportunity for me to have like some of the foods that I might usually have that I think of as being like a little bit more comforting, like rice or something like that. But the food's not so bad. If I had coffee as well, I feel like I'd be really good. But I actually know that that's probably one of the things that's not doing so good in my system. I'm starting to get a sense of the alkaline concept and I want to read and understand a little bit more about that. But I've noticed my mucus levels like way down. And that's something that's really interesting and important for me because of the asthma that I've experienced throughout my life and a lot of allergies related to kind of sinuses and lung type stuff. I'm just typically, if I get any kind of cough or cold type sickness, the cough will hang around for like 6 weeks beyond the part where I'm actually sick. And so ever since I did a 3-day water fast at the start of the year out at Haven, you'll remember. And the second day when I hadn't eaten anything for more than 24 hours at that point, I guess it would have been like 36 hours. No, not 36. Anyway, I hadn't eaten anything for about 24 or 30 hours or something. And it was the first day I can remember waking up without like any kind of mucus or phlegm to cough up. And that was when I really got an understanding of like how food does actually produce mucus and inflammation. I knew about that. And it's all kind of connected, and asthma is inflammation and mucus and all of that. The mucus responds to the inflammation, as I understand it, in the lungs. So there's, anyone who has been following my journey since 2019, pretty much I've been on this healing journey with my asthma, and, it comes and goes, and I feel like this is part of it. So there is a part of me that's starting to tip into like, oh, maybe there's more lifestyle change here that's going to happen than I thought. I don't know.
Yeah, this is uncovering deeper layers.
Yeah. Ultimately,
how's the asthma been in the last 5 days?
Yeah, it is sort of better. But I'm always skeptical because sometimes it gets better for a couple of days and then it'll come back. So
it's going to be interesting to see the next 30 days.
Yeah, exactly. We've got 30 days of it.
And that's going to be really telling. I mean, because this is a spiritual journey, and that's what Megan told me. She's like, this is a spiritual journey, and it definitely is, because it confronts you with the things that you're comforting to take you away from the present moment.
Exactly.
And it's really quite amazing. And I feel like I'm not as hungry. Like my whole thought is like, oh man, I'm going to like be really hungry all the time. I feel satiated and I feel connected to the frequency of things in a deeper way.
I'm not really hungry. Sometimes I find myself wanting something, like I said, but it's more from like, oh, I want that comfort. I want that whatever. It's not a feeling of I've only been like really starving one day, and that was probably the second day when I just hadn't eaten until like 2 or 3 in the afternoon, which happens a lot to me. And I used to drink a couple of coffees in the morning with coconut milk or oat milk, and probably the calories or whatever in the coconut milk or the oat milk would have me feeling full enough. And without that, and just running around after Luca, I realize, oh gosh, it's 3 o'clock, I haven't eaten. That was the one day that I felt sick. But the other thing for me is just, I'm so excited to be on this journey of pursuing food sovereignty, which, we've started growing our own food here in Austin, but ultimately going to do it on a much bigger scale out at our property, Haven. And this journey has just been like really reconnecting me more deeply with just the abundance of food that is available to us, that is fresh fruit and vegetables. And, there's also all the animal products and things that you can throw in there. That this is not really a conversation in my mind about like plant-based eating or anything. I'm just really connected with plants. And this experience has reconnected me with like the joy of just eating an orange. Or on the way over here, I cut up a grapefruit and just ate that on my way over here, and it was so delicious. And I ate a piece of celery, and just really tasting each thing as it is, versus like, or everything's like mixed in together and processed, and we kind of lose that connection from what each individual food. And there is so much, like hundreds of varieties of any given, hundreds of types of apples, hundreds of types of gooseberries, hundreds of types of spinach, like anything you put your name on. There's a lot more plants that are edible as well than what we typically eat in our modern kind of Western
the other
diet.
night you bought some beets, and you roasted the beets, and then you made a little like sauteed salad out of the leafy green stem that comes
Yeah, and
out of the beet.
they're so good.
It was so good.
Yeah.
Chopped up some onions in there.
Is this podcast going to be about food because we're on a cleanse?
Oh yeah, that's what happens. Tell them, babe, how you know I'm hungry.
Yeah, when everything looks good. I'm like looking over.
Oh, Taco Bell. Oh, that looks good. She's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, yeah, I must be hungry.
This like shitty rundown pizza store on the corner. I'm like, what? You're like, that looks so good.
I almost texted you the other day that I want to try that pizza place. There's a pizza place in a gas station on the corner next to our house, and go in that gas station for some waters when I get gas and stuff.
God.
And there's always people going in there though, and I'm like, this has got to be like a decent pizza place in the.
There's a lot of people that eat a lot of things in this country that did not make it
That's
decent.
just a story I'm still holding on to. I need to figure that one out.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna get into, because this is a good segue. We're not gonna get into this just yet, but understanding and questioning. I think this is the reason we're going through this on a higher purview and deeper way is to understand our connection to food, and that's really what's coming up for me. And I think that's why it's such a spiritual experience, and it's really going deeper into the questioning the paradigm of our entire system and structure of we don't know where our food comes from. A lot of it, even though it looks perfect in the stores, is still lacking the nutrients that we need. And part of this cleanse is there's these shakes and these supplements that are like really highly organic farms, and there's a lot of like things that go into making sure that the ingredients are like really high quality. And so we're actually getting nutrients that I don't think our bodies normally get, which is why we don't have to eat as much food, which is really fascinating. And it's really bringing up in a big way, because we bought this property about over a year ago, of what it would feel like to actually grow our own food in organic soil and a regenerative farm, and actually connecting with our food and the frequencies and the reciprocity and the relationship, being in right relationship with our land, and what kind of like energy that's going to provide for these organisms. Like how just we're running not at our fullest potential because we don't have the nutrients we need to run optimally. And we're actually probably like super healthy compared to most people. So it's just a really fascinating journey. And so we'll get into Haven. That's a little teaser for everyone. But I want to start with, because you guys might be wondering, this is my beautiful partner, Sarah, wife, all the things, baby's mama. That's what we used to say in football or in the locker room. I don't know if that's a good thing. It's the truth. And
mama of your baby.
And this is a podcast called Life Beyond the Game, and I'm bringing on elite athletes. Mostly I've had Justin, who's a musician, but it's really anybody that's reached a pinnacle of success and had built their whole identity around a specific goal of achievement, and going through an ego death or a death of a story of who they thought they needed to be to receive love, validation, find success in societal's view. And you have just recently gone through a really massive shift in your own life. I know we've all gone through multiple transitions, but the really big one, and I'd love to start there just to bring it into the context of this show. And it's been a really beautiful journey to witness you in this shift and this growth, but also that, integrating that part of yourself too, that is the entrepreneur, that is the badass businesswoman, incredible leader, and someone that I've learned a tremendous amount in my journey, specifically with business and the acceleration of becoming a better leader, which is something I'm feeling very called to continue to step deeper into. And I would not be where I'm at without you. So maybe take the listeners through kind of who you were, your vision a couple years ago, and the all the energy you put into it, and then the eventual, crash of that journey.
Yeah, where to start? Well, I mean, I got to a point I guess it's really about Growmotely and what has happened there. And I don't know, you can dive me into the backstory more if you want me to, but essentially I've been an entrepreneur for, most of my adult life. The job that I had before I became an entrepreneur was in my family business. So really all of my career, I treated that as it was my own. All of my career, I've been an entrepreneur. So we're almost 20-ish years now, where I've identified as an entrepreneur. And I'd had quite a bit of success building, productizing service businesses, building them up and selling them. Had 3 multi-million-dollar exits. At my peak, I had about $4 million in net wealth, not including the businesses that I had at the time and things like that. And then decided in 2019 that I really wanted to go big. I really wanted to see what I was actually made of. And these couple $1 million exits, it just felt boring. Okay, I could keep doing this on repeat and make a really good living for myself. But I felt no, I got to go to the next level. I'm in the United States now. I have this idea for this tech company around remote work, which is Growmotely. And, I really felt like it would be $1 billion opportunity. I felt that very strongly.
Talk about the importance of you saying you're in the US now because you're Australian and being an entrepreneur in Australia, and talk about the desire to come out here and the opportunities that you saw.
I moved to the US specifically because I felt such a strong resonance here as an entrepreneur. That was such a big part of my identity that it's the resonance. But I guess it's beyond that. It's the optimism, the attitude of try and fail and try again and it's all okay. And, the lack of need for perfect planning and everything to be exactly right. And there's just such an entrepreneurial spirit throughout this country and the people. And unlike in Australia, it's the kind of place where anyone you say to, oh, hey, I'm thinking of doing this thing, they're like, oh my God, that's amazing. How can I support you? I can connect you with these people. That's the typical response in the United States. In Australia, the typical response is, oh, I have this business idea, this thing that I'm going to pursue. People say, oh, do you know how hard that will be? My friend did a business like that and it failed. Or say you want to run a marathon. Oh, marathons are pretty difficult. It's a really big commitment with your training. Are you sure you would want to do that? That's the typical response in Australia. Everything is met with, yeah, but it might fail. It's really hard. It's really difficult. You could hurt yourself. You could be hurt. You could whatever.
Where do you think that comes from?
I mean, it's ingrained in our culture. We call it tall poppy syndrome as well. So whenever someone stands out, we kind of cut them down. It's in our national anthem. Advance Australia Fair. That's the name of our national anthem. So Australia can move forward, we can advance, but it must be fair for all.
So not one or two people advance too far because then you're going to leave us behind.
Yeah.
So it's really about
it's quite cultural. Let's go.
Disparity.
It's
they don't like the disparity. They try to keep that disparity gap
Yeah.
really small. Wow, that's fascinating.
And so because there is that keeping small and it's foundational and it's cultural, that's basically what you're being met with whenever you say, I have this dream, this vision, this idea. You're challenging that person who is staying small, I think, in a lot of ways. And they're like, oh, don't do that. Like, what if it doesn't work out? Like, it'll be hard. And, it'd be better if you just keep doing the thing that you're doing.
This is fascinating because this is in the Constitution of Australia.
In the national anthem.
In the national anthem. So it's a part of the collective frequency of the country's genesis and origin. And you talk about with business and the importance of the culture reflecting the leadership and the energy of how the organization is run from the top and from the genesis of when you're laying the foundation. And these big businesses as they build up, it's the nucleus and the essence of what it is ingrained in no matter how big the organization is. So to see that in the entire country it's really crazy to tap into.
And then here we see like freedom that's very ingrained in the fabric of this country and the people, as is that, like the land of opportunity, that like entrepreneurial spirit, like anything is possible, anyone can make it. Here I feel like we love the underdog story. Like that's amazing. It doesn't matter in Australia. Anyone who rises will pull them down, even if they rose from like, we might celebrate them for a minute, but then we'll pull them down again.
You're going too far, like come back.
Yeah.
Don't leave us.
Don't leave us here. I think in the Philippines they call it, what do they call it? It's something to do with the crabs, because if you apparently
crabs in the bucket.
Yeah, that thing. So the crabs will pull the crab out that's about to escape.
Yep.
And it doesn't really help anyone. Every crab just boils and dies.
Yeah, they all get eaten by humans at some point.
They have a phrase that's more eloquent of how they say it, but it's common in a lot of countries, honestly.
Part of our collective psyche.
Yeah, exactly.
So $1 billion company.
So I came to the US because I felt more aligned with the entrepreneurial spirit. After being here for a couple of years and having that final exit in 2018, I was like, I'm ready to really do something big. And now that I've been here for a bit longer, I have even more confidence that I could be someone to do it. I think there's this moment, like I did always know as a child that I was going to do something with my life. Like I just had this feeling like I'm not just going to be another robot. Like I probably didn't call it robot, but I'm not just going to, I don't know how to describe it, but I had this calling that I would do something with my life that would be interesting or extraordinary or whatever.
Do you remember a specific time in your life remembering that for the first time? Like the opening to that awareness of there's something bigger here for me?
I feel like I remember like anytime I would read a story like that or something as a child, like I would just have this resonance and this identification.
Like an inspiring story of someone doing something big. Yeah.
But I really I didn't grow up with that. Like I barely graduated high school. Like was hanging out with a bunch of drug dealers and people who were just like so much bad shit was going on when I was a teenager. I'm surprised I graduated and then I didn't get into any colleges or anything like that. Like no one expected anything of me. I had no positive role models or anything like that. But there was something like this little seed in me that always just knew like, there's going to be something else. And the moment I really remember thinking about it was when I was 18, I was dealing drugs. And
what drugs were you dealing?
Oh my God. Speed. Yeah.
Speed.
Yeah.
Like methamphetamine.
Yeah.
Well, you weren't using though.
No, I was. Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that. Just to paint the picture.
I think it was, so ironically, as I got more into dealing, I stopped using as much.
You got an intuition.
I think that was my entrepreneurial sense was like, oh,
there's money to be made here. Yeah, this is a business.
This is a business. Let's fucking do this thing, But the way I started dealing was like, I'm getting this every weekend for myself and all my friends. Like, what if I just buy a bigger amount, divvy it up, and then I'll get my share for free? And then I start going, I'm like, oh, okay, I can actually, whatever. And it was very small time, let me tell you.
I feel like that's the genesis of every drug dealer's story right there. I just was buying some for my friends and then it got out of hand and then I saw like, whoa, there's a lot of money in this and it's not too bad. I'm just doing it. Let's do it.
And I went through another experience at the time. So when my little dealing business had become a little bit more established, and it was very small time. One of my best girlfriends tried to commit suicide via, she was a heroin junkie, so it was all kind of related, but she basically tried to kill herself with heroin and a lot of other drugs. And I was the one person that she told and that supported her through her recovery journey. And it wasn't really until she had had this suicide attempt and come out of it that she told me that she was actually addicted to heroin. She was now I would take her to her Narcotics Anonymous meetings and wait outside for her. And I would stay with her when she would be withdrawing, shaking in her bed. And when I saw this experience, and we were 17, I think, that was when I realized, like, whoa, have I ever questioned my speed use, my methamphetamine use? No. I mean, I found it as this fun party drug. I did acid a couple of times, had like a really bad trip, and I was like, I don't know if I want to do that. Never really jived much with cannabis. And then one night went to a party, someone gave me speed. I was like, this is fucking awesome. This is like the best thing ever. Stopped drinking.
Smoking it?
No, we would it was like little crystal form, and we just like put it in a shot of water and drink it.
Like a pill. So it was like a pill of like hard crystal.
It was just like
meth,
crystal.
Or
crystals
meth,
in a bag, yeah.
And then throw it in there and just drink it.
Yeah.
Probably similar to like an Adderall. A little bit more
a little bit more intense, but definitely.
Anxious feeling, I bet. Adderall's a little cleaner.
I thought it felt amazing back then, but the come downs became horrendous. But anyway, I had about a year of using it every weekend. And we would go out to, I was underage, go out to underage nightclubs with my little sister who was 2 years more underage. And yeah, we would just party. We would go to the gay nightclubs and we would just rage all night. And so, yeah, I discovered this drug. It was so fun. Alcohol was getting me into a lot of trouble because I would lose control and make really poor decisions. And so this drug felt like, holy shit, this is so much better. I can stay up, I can party, I'm in control. I'm not like making a total fucking ass of myself or whatever. Like,
and I can drink more.
Well, no, I didn't drink.
You didn't drink, just
no,
used
yeah,
it.
I actually gave up drinking and I just used that and I would party all night. So anyway, fast forward to when my friend had this suicide attempt and, you know, I was helping her through her addiction and her friend had died of a heroin overdose recently, which was what kind of put her into her slump and into her depression and her attempt. So I started questioning like, holy shit, like I've been using this drug for a year. And I had just gotten to the point because I'd started dealing where I was using it a bit more often. I was starting to use it, like there was like a day during the week where I used it because I was cutting up prepping my product for my customers. This is so funny to dive all the way back into this. And it was instant. I just made the decision. I was like, I'm just done. I'm not going to do it anymore. So yeah, that was... Anyway, where were we going with that?
How long did you deal for?
About, not even, I think I used for a year that drug and then probably, so this is where the story started. What happened was, so I would say 6-ish months probably dealing, I don't know. But what happened was one of my friends said to me, he was also small time dealing. He was the guy that I got my stuff off. And he was like, I'm kind of sick of doing all this little shit. I've got an opportunity to do a big delivery. And he's like, I don't want to do it alone. Do you want to do it together? I was like, sure. And he's like, all we have to do is drive this 3-kilo bag down to the Gold Coast. It's an hour drive from Brisbane. And I was like, and he's like, I'll give you half the money. I'm like, great, let's do it. And I think we were going to make $2,000 or $4,000. I don't know. It was like just a couple of $1,000s in 1 hour or 2 hours
back
of our
then,
time.
That's ridiculous.
That was ridiculous.
Yeah.
I was like, I had just graduated high school. I don't even think I'd turned 18 yet.
Wow.
And so I did it. I had a couple of $1,000s in my bank account. First time ever in my life that I actually had, more than $50 or whatever in my bank account because, or it probably wasn't in the bank, it was probably in cash, but it was the first time ever I actually had a few $1,000s to my name. I'd been working small jobs and things since I was 14, earning like $5, $8 an hour, whatever. And all of a sudden I've got a couple of $1,000. And on a whim, I talked with a girlfriend who was in London and I was just, I don't know, I was pissed off at someone that day or something about my life. And I was like, I'm going to go to London. And so I just went and told my mum, I'm going to go to London in a few weeks. She's like, okay, dear. And I went I left the house right then and I went and booked my flight. And then I came back and I said, I'm leaving on this date. And she was like, what the hell? I thought you were just, I was like, no, I'm going. And I went. And so you asked me about when did I know like this seed that I would do something. That trip, I went and worked in a pub outside London for 3 months and I traveled all around Europe. I think I did like 16 countries in 3 months or something. And my whole freaking world blew open. I was just like, wow, there is so much out here to see and explore and be and do, and so many different ways of being. And I want to see it all. I want to do it all. I want to live a big life. And I remember I would journal a lot on the long train trips around Europe because we would train everywhere. And I would journal a lot. And I remember distinctly being on a train and going through Austria, and maybe it was a book I was reading or something like that. But I was starting to fantasize about when I got back to Australia and the things that I would do to create my life. Because like I haven't even gone to college at this point. I've literally
18.
left high school and kind of worked in a gas station for a year and then went on this trip. So
Did you go with anyone or by yourself?
I met this girlfriend over there.
Okay.
Yeah. So we were together for that.
And you
whole
were
trip.
traveling for how long before you went back to Australia?
I was away for 6 months in total.
6 months.
Yeah.
And
And
you
that
came back and
changed
changed
my
everything.
entire life. Yeah. And that was like where I really solidified. Yeah, I'm gonna do something. It's like I want to say I'm gonna be something. It's just I just knew I wanted to live. You know, I wanted to live. I didn't want to just stay in that suburb that I grew up in and just do
You
the
realized you
thing.
could create your own reality.
I could do anything.
And so
yeah.
you went back and you started hustling.
Yeah.
So your entrepreneurial spirit started going into it a little bit.
Yeah, that's when I moved down to Melbourne where my dad was, reconciled with him because I hadn't spoken to him through my teenage years, started working in his business, and then went on this whole entrepreneurial journey.
Tell me about, because I haven't heard about this specific part yet, and I know about your dad leaving you, and you can go into that, but I'm curious, kind of painting the picture and creating the context for that. But what was the moment like when you actually went to reconnect with him in that way? Did you guys sit down and have like a processing time, or was it just like, I just miss you and like, let's do this? Tell me a little bit about that specific experience.
I did a lot of my own processing, and my dad just didn't really do that.
Yeah. Tell people what happened. What happened when you were younger?
I think what happened around those late teenage years and being into my own relationships and having my own struggles and challenges, I had an opening that, okay, my parents are just people. They did their best. This was their relationship. My dad cheated on my mom, then he married someone else. I'm like, all right, this shit happens. Like, I'm no longer 10 years old thinking my two parents are the entire world and everything's perfect. I'm now 17, 18. I've had my own relationships and things work out and not work out, and people are cheating on people and all sorts of different things are happening, And so I think in that moment I had a lot more compassion for my dad, and I started to see like, well, yeah, he was just a person, and this is what the decisions that he made to deal with the relationship and the situation he was in. And I started to let more forgiveness and compassion into my heart. So it was really just a maturing, I think, a maturing past just the anger and the wanting to just disconnect and cut him out of my life. And so when I moved to Melbourne, I was just more in contact with him and he was supporting me. And I think that, well, he did love me. And so, of course, he was going to support his daughter who was coming down. And so he was helping me get set up, and he helped me get a job, which was actually with his business partner. And they worked in two different offices, and then they brought their company together. So in essence, I did just work for his company from the time I got down there. So yeah, he was just helping me out, and I was leaning into that help. And we just built a new relationship at that point. Now, when I went overseas again, because I did another like 3 years living in, so I went down to Melbourne, I worked with him, paid my way through an IT diploma, and then went to live in, where did I go? Canada for a year, then London, then Dublin, and a bunch of travel. So I was away for about another 3 years. When I left, I wrote him a letter, and because he was helping me out with my moving and packing everything, and I stored stuff at his house, and we were having a really good relationship at this point, really good.
How old were you at this point?
21.
21. And how long have you been talking to your dad up to before you left?
Like 3 or 4 years. So
Okay.
I guess I started talking to him again around that 17, 18, moved back to Melbourne, turned 19 in Melbourne, and then maybe I was 21. So I'd been really in Melbourne for 2 years working with my dad, building this really good relationship with him again, but very bypassing, like just not talking about anything that happened. Just
Yeah, it makes sense. Like starting a new relationship here. Let's not like that was an old part of you,
Yeah.
old part of me, but I love you and there's this love here. So let's just start from here and build something new.
And the relationship we built from there was like very much like a daddy's girl kind of relationship, which was not the dynamic as a child. My sister was very much daddy's girl and I was mummy's girl, if we want to use that terminology. But she was kind of the one that was always with dad and I was always with mum. So it wasn't the relationship that I had as a child, but very much became this like father-daughter special bond kind of relationship because we were working together.
Just create a little context for people listening. He left your family when you were 10 years old?
When I was 10, my parents went broke, their company. And my dad said to us, let's all move from the city of Melbourne to the city of Brisbane, where mum was originally from. You guys go. I'm going to stay back and sell the house and tidy up everything. And then for 4 years, he proceeded to tell us he was coming soon. He was still tidying things up. He was still doing this. He was still doing that. And one day I came home from school and there was a letter addressed to us, to me, my mum and my sister, that was telling us to fuck off and get out of their lives once and for all, and that this woman was sick of us trying to get Paul, my dad, back. So in that moment, the last 4 years of my life where I thought my dad was coming, I realized he has another family. He has another woman. I didn't know how long it had been going on for. I didn't know who she was. She had really scratchy kind of handwriting. I remember the letter so clearly. And I felt the rug come out from under me of every single thing. And I felt naive and stupid. And I sit here now and think, oh, how could you believe it for 4 years that your dad wasn't coming? But when you're that age, you only know the world around you and you believe what your parents tell you. And my dad always said he was coming.
So there's a lot of energy built up here when you reconnect with your dad that is still unprocessed, still living under the surface, but you're putting it down, which is what most people do. And the ability to kind of not talk about it and connect and rebuild a relationship. I mean, it just goes to show the depth of love that you guys had for each other to even just put it, but it's about putting it in the unconscious and building going forward, but it's still there. I just wanted to paint the context for the listeners.
I mean, I was much more aware of it. Like I had gone through my own process very much. Like I'd gone through a huge process as a teenager, being very angry, really just delinquent essentially, like just getting into all sorts of trouble and just looking for, I just wanted love and looking in all the wrong places to get that love and constantly being rejected by adults around me for my behavior and just fighting back against that. Just so much anger was inside me and bitterness and this kind of independence as well. This just like, fuck you all kind of thing. Like none of you get me. None of you care to try to get me. And so much just like not understood about what happened with my dad, not processed. When I was sort of 17, 18, I had really started processing what had happened. Like I said, I understood him and real life and how things happen. And so I felt like I had done some work and I understood that he was not available to have those kinds of conversations. And I honestly didn't even know him well enough at that point. It was like this stranger in a way who was giving me a ton of love and opportunity and helping me. And it's all I ever freaking wanted. So I was like, I'll just reconcile this within myself, know that he's not, given the fact that he couldn't have a conversation with our family about the fact that, things weren't working out and he still loved us, but he was going to be with someone else. Like he wasn't going to have a conversation.
Did you ever try?
So when I went to Canada, when I left, I wrote him a letter telling him I love him, I forgive him for everything that happened. Because I wanted to have the conversation, but I really knew he wasn't able. And that remained. He died when I was 32 and we still never had the conversation, but I told him over and over again how much I loved him and made sure that as best as I could that he would know that I love him and I forgave him. And also that it's just life, you know. I forgive him and I love him doesn't mean sometimes I don't feel angry about it or whatever, but that I'd processed it. But when he was at the very worst of one of his benders, because he was an alcoholic and he tipped over to being a non-functioning alcoholic in the last probably 4 or 5 years of his life, one of his very worst, where I came into the office because we worked together at the time and he'd been drinking for months at this point, but you know, it was, I used to go in the office early. It was like 7 a.m. or something and he was so drunk and I quickly kind of realized and I'm like, fuck. And he like walked out of the office and came back and he'd been sucking a red wine bottle. He actually had like red wine mark on his lips.
In the morning, just downing it.
Yes. And red wine spilled all down the front of his shirt and he was that wasted and that far into this months long bender that he didn't even know or care anymore, that it was 7 a.m. and he had wine all down the front of his shirt. And I was just like, oh my God, like our staff are going to be arriving soon. Like we have this office with 15 people or something that work here. Like what the fuck am I going to do? Like where do we go from here? It's 7 a.m. and you're fucking plastered. It did not go well from there. But that morning when he realized that I realized, because I was one of the only people that would actually confront him. And I was like, Dad, you know, you've been drinking. Like, I think you really can't be here right now. Like you're really intoxicated. And he just put his head down and started crying. And he said, I'm so sorry for everything I did to you guys. I'm so sorry. That was the only time he was ever able to speak it, you know? And I just felt so bad for him at that point because I was like, we could talk about this and it's okay. Like you can be okay. But I don't think he ever forgave himself. I also think because of his incredible dislike of conflict of any kind, he painted himself into a life that he wasn't happy in so many ways. And I knew that he was most likely going to exit somehow, some way. I made my peace with it before it happened. That doesn't mean it wasn't shocking, doesn't mean it wasn't, you know, one of the most difficult things I moved through. But he did die unexpectedly, as in how the incident occurred. It was unexpected, if that makes sense. Yeah.
But it was still alcohol.
It was alcohol induced. Yeah. Accident. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. We're going there and painting the context for why there's this desire to create a better life for yourself.
Yeah. I mean, that was the other thing that I really learned from him is that already I had this taste of what was possible and how I wanted to live a big life and experience a lot of things. And my dad was quite successful business-wise, so I just learned a lot about like, cool, I can do business and create wealth and create a lifestyle that I want. But the other thing that I learned from him is like, I'm not going to live in my own cage. I'm not going to create a cage for myself. Like I'm going to be brave and I'm going to have the conversations that are hard to have because I want to be free. Like I don't want to be trapped by my own inability to choose the things that are right for me and say no to the things that are not.
Oh. So where does that take you? You come over to the US with just exiting your financial
Yeah, we're trying to talk about what's
business.
happened recently. I'm sorry, I'm going way back.
Oh, don't be sorry. No, I wanted to paint the context. This is my gift, is to take you down the threads and then bring you back up to the story. So you make it your way to the US because you have this dream.
Mm-hmm.
And it's talk about the challenge as an entrepreneur of going from a country similar size geographically as the US, but with considerably less people. I think there's 5 major cities, 25 million people, as opposed to the US, which is populated 350 million people.
Yeah.
And just one of the leading kind of cultures and empires really of the whole world.
Mm-hmm.
And so going and being an entrepreneur in a kind of a big fish in a small pond, and then going into being a small fish in a big pond. Talk about that journey, that desire, and that hope for this expansion into the next layer after you've kind of already had those exits and that success in your life.
Yeah, that's very much the words I would use, like small fish, big pond. In Australia, I had quite a bit of success, and I did quite a bit of media and a lot of public speaking, and was quite a face of entrepreneurship, especially like female entrepreneurship in Australia, and also of finance, because I was in personal finance background. And it's a double-edged sword in Australia, because on the one hand, it's like awesome to be known and have all these experiences and get to go to all these cool parties and get invited to really amazing events and doors opening and photo shoots and all this fun stuff.
You were hot shit back in Australia.
Well, and it wasn't like anything crazy, but it was, it was fun. But it's a double-edged sword in Australia, because at the same time, everyone's like not really supporting you.
Because of the cultural story we talked about earlier.
Exactly.
Wow.
And so when I came to the US, I was a little bit burnt out of pushing past that, because that was a really big thing in Australia. Was like, I have to push past like everybody's negativity and do it anyway, because that's what I want. And I have to push past the criticism and the judgment and the whatever, and just live my life and know that like I'm just on my journey and I'm doing my thing. But that gets tiring. And so I came here, I was a little bit burnt out from all of that. So I took like probably the first 2 years I was here, I was just like running my companies, finishing up this last one, having this exit, and I wasn't doing a lot. They were still Australian companies. I was living here. But I had managed to turn all my companies remote and get into this global work kind of space and become really passionate about that. So yeah, fast forward to 2019, been in the US for a couple of years, really found my footing. Just such high resonance here, so exciting to be here. And I'm free of this past company. I've got money in the bank. In the meantime of all that, I'd been married and divorced. And all of a sudden I was like, I want to do something really freaking huge. And I'd wanted to do something in technology for a long time. Came up with the idea for Growmotely, which is a global talent marketplace, essentially helping companies anywhere in the world find and hire talent anywhere in the world into long-term positions. And I was super passionate about it, because there's no easy way, particularly 3-4 years ago, but even now, Growmotely is the place to do it. But there's not necessarily outside of Growmotely an easy way for a company to put a job up and actually access a global applicant pool. And when you can work remotely, then technically anyone, anywhere can work with you. So that was the problem I was solving. I saw it as a huge opportunity. The business came through really as like a series of downloads. Like it felt very much like a soul calling. And I was like, this is it. I'm going to go into technology. I'm going to build $1 billion company. It's going to be the most amazing thing ever. And that was the journey that I've been on for the last few years.
You started, just to paint the picture for the timeline here, you did all of this vision for this company because you had been working remote. You had a staffing company called Grow My Team to help staff your remote companies, had multiple companies at the time, and being able to automate that process that you've already had a lot of experience in. And you closed your first round of friends and family funding literally right when the pandemic started.
Yeah, March 13th of 2020.
And
The Monday after was lockdown.
So talk about the acceleration of that vision going from, okay, this is like a 10, 15-year thing. This is definitely the future, but we're going to start building the foundation for it and building it from the ground up, to overnight is like, okay, everybody went remote.
Yeah.
This is it.
So the original plan was keep running, grow my team. We've got this great little global staffing company that's, you know, turning over like $1 million in revenue or something. We're not really in profit, but we're like, we can keep going and build Growmotely in the background so that as the world starts to see that remote is a possibility, you know, we're ready to go. That was the original idea. Pandemic happens. I'm like, holy shit, we got to move right now. So basically, pretty quickly, within the first 6 months, I feel like made the decision firstly, we got started building our technology right away, kind of prioritize that on top of anything else. Made the decision to end up just closing Grow My Team and rolled the clients in. So we kind of kicked off some revenue in Growmotely, but like ultimately we actually made less money by moving them over. But I was like, I didn't even care at that point. I was like, $1 million revenue business, who cares? Like, I got this $1 billion opportunity here. I just need to get that out of my hair so that I'm only focused on one thing. So that was another thing, that I'd always had more than one business. And I had started believing a story that's why I hadn't reached my fullest potential. That's why I hadn't reached the heights of success, because I was deviating my focus. It was something that often, you know, other entrepreneurs would say to me, mostly unsolicited, but, you know, that was the advice that people would give me, like, oh, you could do more if you focused on one thing. So here I get this big vision, this big idea, and I'm like, this is the time. This is it. I'm going all in. This is my big thing. So I grow my team down, start building the tech, and it's just like go 100 miles an hour so that we can go as fast as physically possible and just pump it out there, media, speaking. I wrote a book, like whatever we could do, let's just go.
I want to talk a little bit about the letting go, because I remember that process, because I mean, the label would be like a serial entrepreneur. Some people are just entrepreneurs. They see opportunity, they build things to solve those problems, and they have the bandwidth and the energy signature to handle multiple projects because it's in their DNA. And that's something you've always had. Yeah. So it wasn't just Grow My Team. It was, I think there was a couple other smaller kind of startups that you were being involved when maybe some of them were non-operational. Yeah. But you had these opportunities. And I remember that moment when you're like, it was like you had this decision to make of, do I go all in and focus all of my energy on this big opportunity, or do I kind of stick with having multiple opportunities and have not as much energy and focus, which is this thing that I want to do requires the energy of focus. So talk about the process of having to let go of that story to focus, and what kind of, because there was a part of it that made you feel safe having multiple opportunities too, right?
Yeah. And I mean, it's all just a journey and experience, and I'm glad that I've had it, and I don't know that it was right or wrong. As I am now, I think having multiple things is a little bit more my energy signature. But I was also identifying that I was keeping myself safe at some level, like having multiple income streams and things, and like hedging my bets a little bit. And I've spent a lot of my life, I think, keeping myself safe, hedging my bets, making sure I was safe and everybody around me was safe. Because when my dad left when I was 10, and then ultimately the whole thing blew up when I was 14, I was like, my mum was struggling. I was worried about her all the time. And I had a little sister. And so I was like, I just got to keep everything together. That was how I took it on. Excuse me. And so ever since then, it's just been like safety, independence, hedging my bets, ensuring I always have multiple options, things like that. That's kind of like, I can look at that in many areas of my life, actually. So making this decision to go all in on Growmotely was like, felt like there was this decision to back myself. Like, come on, this is the time. You've been called. You've answered the call. So freaking answer it. Like, step up, let go of this stuff and really go for it. And
you start building the tech. You have that first initial investment coming in. You start, this is right when I met you, by the way, so for everybody that kind of paid the text. This is literally, I was like the last, I invested in your company and in you before we actually started dating, which was like a week before we started dating, because it all happened around the pandemic, very divine. But I believed in you so much in your vision. You know, I wrote you a check and closed you around. You oversubscribed. A lot of people are supporting you because of your integrity and your honesty and your authenticity. And I know you've started and raised money in other businesses. And so you have like a community of people that are here to back you. You start building the technology, and then the pandemic happens, and then there's this acceleration, this idea of like, okay, we there's an opportunity here, and there's going to be a lot of people getting into this space to solve it. So let's go. And you almost immediately start raising more money. The first 6 to 12 months is building the tech, but then you start realizing, okay, I need more capital. Talk about the journey of raising money and the challenges that you faced during that process.
Yeah, so my first round was like 350,000, and then, as you say, fast forward about 6 months, I'm like, all right, need more money. So I start raising again, and ended up raising another $1 million, which basically got us through to getting our product live and kind of our first however many months in market. And all of that was pretty much family and friends, like people who know me, people who have watched me in my career. So most of the people that have written a check into my company are people that I know. And so fast forward, I go through 2021. So I think I closed most of that money toward mid-ish 2021. And then all of a sudden I realized like, well, we need a lot more. Like we need $5 to $10 million pronto if we're going to keep operating. And I probably should have done that earlier, but I was very inexperienced at raising money. So I'd done a lot of startups, had a bunch of success, but it had all been bootstrapped. And so this is my first time raising money, and I'm trying to figure out the whole game of raising money. Totally underestimated how much I needed. Things were moving really, really fast. And, you know, I look back on hindsight on just like the game board of remote work in 2020 and 2021 and venture capital and how that all, future of work, how that all was. And I didn't play it right. You know, I didn't know the rules of the game that I was playing, and I didn't play it right. If I look back now and think about what would have been a perfect gameplay, would have been very early in the pandemic, be like, great, I just closed my $350,000 round, but the pandemic just happened, so we're going to raise $10 million right now. And I'm pretty sure I would have been able to close that in 2020 had I had the skills to be able to have those kinds of conversations and make those networks and all of that.
So that's a big part of the fundraising process, right? It's not necessarily how good an idea you have. It's kind of how you navigate the conversations, the energy, the confidence. There's all these things, and playing in that realm, there's a lot of energy dynamics that if you're not prepared or have experience, I mean, you have to go through it to learn.
Yeah, exactly.
You're obviously way more experienced now having going through the gauntlet, and then in retrospect, knowing what you would have done differently.
Exactly. And I'm just sharing this just from a place of like, okay, well, like, what did I learn? Like, how would I have done it differently? I'm not disappointed in it, just is how it is. But I was in very fast moving waters, having to expand my abilities and my skills very, very quickly in many areas, like in leadership, in technology, in raising money. 2022, I mean, we started the year with 5 people, and by November, we were 26 people or something like that. So, you know, 4x growth really, really fast as well, dealing with all of that in my company. And anyhow, I did set out in 2022 to raise 5 million. I finally got the guts to like do the thing. So I set out in 2022, spend the whole year meeting with VCs. I outreach 400 VCs, meet with over 100 of them, have these conversations, and nothing fucking happens. Like we don't raise a dime, basically.
Talk about, 100 times hearing no, and not just no.
Oh no, they sit there and tell you company shit and why it's not going to work. And
what were some of the main things that you would hear from these VCs as far as their critiques on your business?
Oh, I mean, I think the common one we would get was our valuation. So it wasn't even really about our business, but our valuation was too high. So that was, for anyone who knows the venture capital space, 2021 was like the biggest deal flow that's ever happened in history. And 2022 was like the biggest contraction of deal flow that's ever happened in history. So back those years onto each other, you can understand the valuation we had coming out of 2021 made sense and very quickly did not make sense. So it was hard for me to catch up on that though, and like backpedal and say, well, can I lower my valuation? Is it worth lowering my valuation to get money in now? And there was sort of this period where maybe I could have done that. I don't know. Investors were pushing back on the valuation pretty hard, but I never got like so far enough where I had terms or anything like that. So, ultimately we never really got past a couple of meetings anyway. And the other thing that we were hearing was like our product was too broad. We'd built too much, and it was going to be, and I just kept thinking, we've built the right thing. We just need lots of money so that we can build a team now to be able to keep building out this thing. But without money, we definitely had built too much, for sure. Like, for sure. And one of the things that I came to by October, I was in Israel and with my good friend Janma and Marianne on a YPO tour, like entrepreneur tour of Israel. And I was just in absolute crisis mode. Like I was so stressed. My nervous system was shot to shit last year. Like I just destroyed myself with the lack of sleep. Like Luca would wake up and then I'd just stay up for 4 hours stressed and worrying and not sleeping. And then I'd get up and work, or I was just working. I remember around September, I said to you, okay, like I got to go all in. Like I haven't been working hard enough. I got to push harder. Can you support me for a month so that I can work like 16-hour days? And that was just all my old shit coming up, all my old protective strategies of like just do more, work harder, hustle, push every other thing in your life away to make this happen. And it didn't fucking work at all. Like I just nearly had a breakdown after a week of trying to do sales calls back to back because I'm not built for that. And anyway, that whole experience was terrible. So I was in Israel, and I realized our benefits marketplace that we'd built. So we tried to build this global benefits marketplace and it just wasn't working. Like the uptake wasn't there. People weren't spending their benefits dollars. And I was just like, we need to just cancel this program. And it felt so heavy to think, oh my God, but like this is part of what we're meant to be building. This is such an important part of the overall solution, the overall product. And I was with one of my friends, Daniela, who is a really successful entrepreneur. I think LATAM's only female unicorn founder. And I remember being on the beach and just talking through it with her. And we were walking back to our Airbnb we were staying at. And she was like, just cut it. Just cut that, do this. And it was like so simple for her. And in that moment, I also realized, man, I've made this thing so freaking personal because I could see what she was saying was right. Yet I hadn't been able to make that decision for months, even though I had known, because it had become so personal, all of it. I didn't want to let anyone or anything down. And I knew the benefits marketplace wasn't working. We need to cut it. I also knew we weren't going to raise this money at this point. Like I'd been at it all year. I was so burnt out. I mean, it was so hard to rally energy for those investor calls at this point. And once your deal has gone around for that long, like it's just gets really difficult. And so
where did that attachment to the idea not being able to shift or let it go? What was that? Why was it so hard to? Because even when she said it, you knew, but you could notice the resistance in that moment of like, but I can't. What was that attachment? Where did that come from?
My investors,
but the letting go of the thing, is it because you think if you let go of that, then the whole thing's not going to work, and it started bringing in the whole thing is going to have to be let go of?
I didn't necessarily think if I let go of this, the whole thing won't work. It was more that what was opening for me was in general, what we're doing is not working. And so it wasn't specifically like, if I do this, it won't. It was just like benefits marketplace isn't working. Raising money isn't working. I'm going broke pretty fucking quickly right now.
So you had this story of optimism of like, we just keep pushing. And then that was kind of this end of the road realization.
Everything was starting to come down. I was like, and this is not working for my health. Like I'm not present with Luca. like I said, my nervous system was absolutely screwed. I was just a mess. And my energy was so low. And I mean, ultimately, to answer your question, what happened, I guess not even a month later, a few weeks later, I put in my last $35,000. So I started the journey as a multimillionaire. And I remember that night, I woke up in the middle of the night. I was sleeping on the floor in Luca's room because he still had a crib that he wouldn't sleep in. And so I was on the floor with him in there. And I came in to you and I was just like wired and stressed out of my brain. And I told you like, hey, I've put my last money in, like I'm so stressed. Da, da, da. And you were like, well, what are you going to do? Like you can't sink the family. And in that moment I was like, oh my God, like I can't keep going. There's nowhere else to go. Like, what am I doing? And why did I even take it this far? Like I've already sunk myself, which does impact our family. Like, why did I do this? And so the next day was awful. I was just crying all day and on the phone with my advisors who were amazing in supporting me through it. And over the next month kind of proceeded to, really face reality that it wasn't working the way that I had wanted to, and exploring what my options were. And, I'll come back to it, but the cliff notes are we got a solution and everything's good with the company, and I'll come back to that. But, there was a really dark couple of weeks in there, and yeah, just a lot of feeling of failure and realizing that all year I'd been holding so tight. And I had been trying to be abundant and to be expansive and get into the right energy flow, but I was just gripping so tight. And ultimately, what I was gripping so tightly to was, if I am not an entrepreneur who is wealthy and successful, people won't love me. You won't want to be with me. My friends won't want to be my friends. My world won't be the way it is. I won't be able to go to Israel with Jamma. I won't be able to go to those events and be with those people. I won't be loved. And that was what I couldn't look away from anymore. It was like, wow, I was so scared of not being loved that I almost took it all down.
Talk about that process of healing from that, and there's this one thing, confronting it, and then going on the journey of really feeling what that means, the gravity of that, and working through that emotion and the process, and then coming to the foundation, the truth of, oh, I am loved for who I am, and this is not just who I am. This is just an aspect of who I am, and it's a story that I've built up and I'm so attached to. But talk about the process of peeling back that story, letting it go. What was that process like? What did you move through? What were some of the emotions that you felt? What were some of the dark times and challenges that came up during that? Because it was probably like a 4 to 6 week period that was the end of a over 12 to 18 month period of real intense stress. And
it was really that kind of, from that day in November when I put the last money until around Christmas when we went up to Colorado, is when I think I started really integrating and letting go of what had happened. But I remember there was a day that I just was crying in the bed, and you were holding space for me, and I was just punching the pillows and screaming and letting go of it all. I'm so grateful it happened. I was so scared of this ever happening. This was the thing that once I made it, once I had established myself as worthy in my Father's eyes, essentially, and then in the world's eyes, or whatever world was seeing me, as successful, as someone who was an authority figure who could talk about these things and talk to them and had something worth listening to say, I was terrified of losing it. and the wealth that went along with that. One of my biggest fear was like losing my money and losing the way people saw me. And I'm so glad that it happened. I'm so glad it happened because I don't know how I would have actually known that I'm still loved if it didn't happen. Like maybe there was a gentler path to that, but I don't care. It actually doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah, because you're free from that
because
story.
I'm free. Yeah. And that's the thing that I realized is I actually had created my own cage because I was holding on so tightly to being that successful, accolade-laden entrepreneur because I didn't want to lose the love of the people in my life. And turns out everybody still loves me. Some people don't even know what the hell I do. They don't really care. And yeah, I'm just so grateful. And one of the most beautiful experiences of that journey of the integration was you reaching out to all of my friends and asking them, which included investors and people who have known me for a long time, as well as people who have known me over the last couple of years. And you asked them to send a short video of what they loved about me and valued about me beyond, this idea that I had of what was important of myself as an entrepreneur. And it was about an hour worth of video in the end. And I think it was Christmas morning, wasn't it? That we sat and you sat me down in front of it and I was just crying and crying and crying and processing and receiving so much love. And that was that was the moment where I was like, wow, like I am still loved. It's okay. And I'm still integrating it. I'm still I'm still on that journey of finding this new version of myself and becoming comfortable as this new version who is no longer a successful, wealthy entrepreneur, because that was the fucking front and center story of my life. Like it was so important that I upheld that. And just to be me and it doesn't matter to anyone else. Nobody else knows what this story is that I'm running around my days thinking about. But to find myself now, not beholden to that story is like so beautiful and so powerful. And I'm still learning. I'm still integrating.
Talk about the power of, because it's really important, the emotion, because I'm really grateful that all came through in such a perfect and beautiful way, because what I find when we get to these points of deep challenge is underneath all of it, the anger, the resentment, the question, the worthiness is all just a deep energetic grieving process that needs to take place, which can only be processed, and the emotion and energy in our emotional body be processed through the actual feeling of it. And that hour-long experience of you watching these videos of people you loved and just crying for an hour straight and the catharsis of that and the energy moving. Talk about that experience specifically as it pertains to the healing process, and how did it feel to go through that? And then on the back end, what did you notice a palpable shift in your story from that specific experience and those feelings that were able to be processed?
Yeah, for sure I did. I mean, one of the big things that was so stressful for me during the period was my investors. And that's what I was alluding to earlier. I just, I felt like I didn't want to let them down. And second to that, or maybe not even, but my staff, our whole community, like all of the people involved in Growmotely felt so important to me. I didn't want to let them down. And I remember Heather, who's one of my other early investors, had a video on there and she just told me like, I love you. It doesn't matter. Like everything is okay. And, you're more than this. And it was like, that was the thing I feared, that I'm going to let down all these people who invested in me because it's everyone I know. I'm letting them down in such a big way. Like they're having an actual financial loss here potentially. So that moment of her on the video was like very powerful for me in particular. Shout out to Heather. Thank you so much.
Heather Beam.
Sister.
What up?
But Yeah, I think I grieved a lot in that hour watching it, and that was just a very cathartic process and a lot of letting go. And I did move forward a lot lighter, like realizing like, whoa, I actually am still loved. I have other value to give, or that I do give to people. And I remember driving actually and talking with one of our friends, Brad, about it. And he was like, oh, it was actually kind of annoying how much work you were doing. Like, I was missing you. I wanted to hang out with you more. And I was like, oh, that's a different perspective as well. Like, here I am thinking, I got to work so hard so that all these people love me. And everyone's like, wish you didn't work so much so we could hang out with her.
Yeah.
So, there were a couple of perspective shifts there. And I think I'm still having them. Like, my life has been very driven. It's both, right? We all have these different parts of ourselves. There's that part of me that wants this big, bold, brave, expansive, experience-laden life. And then there's this part of me that's like, got to have a backup plan, got to be safe, freaking got to be very independent, got to be providing for a bunch of other people, not just me. I got to be so safe that I'm actually providing for others. So all of that, like, I'm seeing how much those fear-based, scarcity-based protectors have been there all the time.
And the journey continues of unwinding them.
Yeah.
And before we get into the value and one of the most courageous things you can really do, which is becoming a parent and taking that journey and that initiation, let's just offer some closure with where Growmotely is at, because that might be a question on somebody's mind. I don't know how much you can talk about the actual deal, but going to a place where basically the company was in a few $100,000 in debt and you were in really dire straits, and we were, as a family, I mean, it was
stressful.
It was stressful.
Yeah.
So talk about how the miracle that happened as much as you can as far as the deal, and then we can kind of transition into the shift that you've been through after that.
Yeah, it really was a miracle. I had a quick week-long schooling on American bankruptcy laws and options, and learning that you don't even have to go bankrupt. You can just shut your company down and all sorts of things. And I was like, okay, well, that's an option. I have that one. And just starting to try to create options, I guess, so that I could make a decision for the way forward. Trying to get out of this place of feeling like just like this one way down the deep, dark dungeon that I've been going down, and be like, all right, let's create some options and see what we can do here once I'd processed the gravity of it all. So sent out an investor update, letting everyone know where we were at and that what we were exploring. One of our investors wrote back and said, I'm interested in exploring this. I'm like, okay. So I kind of pursue that. And then I'm starting to just have different conversations with people. And like I said, I'm not going to go into all the details of this just because there's non-disclosure agreements and things like that in place. But essentially, I ended up with 5 interested buyers in a very short period, which was a miracle beyond miracles. And so all the way from like fully acquiring the company to helping me fund it to all sorts of different options. Every deal was completely different. And I ended up closing a deal late February with a company who are, we're basically doing a deep partnership and kind of going on a journey into the future together. So all rolls on with Growmotely, and it truly is a really amazing partnership. And one thing that I think why the miracles started coming was because at some point in this journey where I had these deals opening, there was this option, and I was like, everything in my body was saying, no, this is not the option. This is not the path. But the deal was pretty good. Like on paper, it looked good. And I was convincing myself every which way and center that I could do this deal. And then one day I just realized, no, I can't do the deal. And the day that I said no, just in my mind even, everything started shifting. And I just went with the one that felt most heart aligned. And I think Mary Margraves maybe said to me, make the most loving choice. Make the most loving choice for you. And I realized like I hadn't been making loving choices for me. I really hadn't. I'd been making choices that I thought were best for my team, my investors, our community, other people, trying to make sure everybody still loved me. But I wasn't making loving choices for me. And so that's the choice that I made. And yeah, I'm stoked with how it's going and where it's going.
Part of that loving choice was, just painting the picture with our family dynamic. I mean, you were pregnant during this time. You gave birth to Luca at this time, and we had a nanny for much of the early year and a half of Luca's life. There was a couple months in there where our nanny had a baby, but our plan was double entrepreneurial household. We're both kind of in that masculine energy, the masculine role, and we both are creators and we're creating big things and we're supporting each other in that. And we hired a nanny to kind of fill that nurturing mother role within our household, which was really, really great for a while. And during the process of our nanny having her kid, she was very much, she still is now, she's reintegrated back into our family dynamic, which is really beautiful. But getting to that point where you're questioning everything and realizing I don't want to work like that, and breaking down those stories and getting to a point where you decide, my son needs me. My son needs his mom, and these are formidable years of his life. And I'm going to take on this role of being his mom. And we're talking in like the energetic sense, like, of course you're his mom, but the role of really raising him and being around him nonstop, especially now that he's coming more online. So talk about that process of going from entrepreneur, having all that support and really focus all your energy on work, into, okay, I'm feeling this call that the loving decision is for this, to nurture this family, nurture myself, and raise my baby and support, my partner. Talk about that shift, because that's a massive shift for you. It's not
huge.
Nothing that you didn't. You're not the traditional mother who dreams of having kids and has always like waited for this opportunity. Like have been professionally focused your entire life. So talk about that.
I needed to be, because that's why people love me. Yeah, it happened really easily actually. So we had another nanny for a few months and it wasn't the best fit ultimately. And she left and we got another nanny for a week and she quit because I don't know why. That was just a weird thing. But when she quit, I was at yoga thinking, oh, what am I going to do? And basically what I reflected on, and I was like, well, I was kind of naive. I mean, our current nanny, who has been our nanny since before Luca was born, Belle, she's just amazing. She's one of our best friends. And she was there the day I was in labor. She was there when Luca was born. So for him, she's like a third parent almost. Now, nanny number 2 comes along and he's just not interested in spending time with somebody he doesn't know. And I didn't really perceive that initially. And then I throw in this other woman for a week in the mix because the other one left, and he's just losing his mind at this point. Like, why is my mum leaving me every day? And I think I went to yoga the day that the second nanny quit or the day after. And during the class, I just decided, I'm not going to hire another nanny. Like, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to do this because this is not right. Like, I don't want to be leaving him with people he doesn't know and hoping for the best and watching him essentially be traumatized, because he was. And we're still recovering from that. We're still working on, watching him go from being completely securely attached to any adult. Any of our friends could, be in the room. Any of us could come or go and he'd be fine, to after that kind of second and third nanny experience, him just not being comfortable at all. And I know there's some things around the age and that as well, but essentially, he was not coping with it. And I just knew in that moment, like, this is what I have to do. And so, yeah, it was so crazy as well, because one of the things, I have a habit of ruminating on things. Like, I'll get stuck on stuff and I'll worry about little things. And one of the things I always used to worry about was something happening to him. And I'd drive myself down these like really crazy stories of what could happen. And ever since I became his full-time carer, I don't worry about that stuff anymore. I probably worry the normal amount that mamas worry, but it does feel much more normal now. It was not normal before. And, I kind of hacked like a life code there. I think that sometimes the things we're worrying about are not it's not the actual thing. Like it's also like a dream or some other thing to interpret. It's what I think was happening was my psyche was trying to say, be with your son. Like this is important, and you're worrying because you're missing his life. So yeah, I am still working and running my company. And I'm finding ways to balance all of that with what I'm doing. And Belle, our beautiful, we love Belle so much. She's now, one day a week and occasionally takes him a second day, which is awesome. So, we do still have some support, but I'm certainly front and center primary carer for Luca, and it's amazing.
Yeah, I'm so grateful for you and seeing the way that you're showing up for him and for our family in that way. And I know it is having a huge impact on him. How does it feel to be a mom and to take this role more full on?
Yeah, it feels like, what the hell was I thinking before? Like nothing is more important than him, Nothing is. But I can see, because my very own like belief structure around my being allowed to exist, being worthy of existing, was counter to being a full-time mom. And so I can see why there was no space for it before. There was no space for me to even consider that to be an option, because I did not believe that I was worthy of existence if I wasn't being a successful entrepreneur. So yeah, it's amazing. I'm super grateful for it. It feels like so natural. It's hard. Oh my
Yeah,
God.
talk about some of the challenges, because the other night, probably like a week or two ago, I remember telling you he was like throwing a fit, doing his. Sometimes he like just wakes up and throws up in the middle of the night, or he wants to go eat, in the middle of the night, and he's a night owl energetically, and we're both like in bed by 7:30, and we're like, hey, like, dude, let's go to bed. We'll go to bed with you. Like, let's lay down. And he's just like wide-eyed, like up and doing his thing. And there was a night just a week or two ago, and he was like screaming. Like sometimes he'll just wake up from like a nightmare or something, just like
Literally, yeah.
It's like, dude, hey, let's take a breath together. Let's calm down. He's like, And I remember going up to him like, babe, I'm not going to, but I feel in my body, I want to pick him up and throw him across the room. Like there's this internal rage that I just like I want to hit my son. And it's so challenging. And I'm really grateful that I have the tools to regulate my nervous system, and I'm breathing through it, and it's going to be fine. But I just want to acknowledge that my energy in my body is like so pissed off right now. Like, what are those experiences like for you, and how often do they come up? Because I don't think it's talked about enough how hard it is to be a parent.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I definitely think there's something, with you too, where he like pushes your buttons a little bit. Something astrologically. What is it? You're an air sign. No, he's an air sign and you're a fire.
No, he's a fire. I'm an air.
So you guys are like doing your thing. I'm earth over here. I think there is a little bit of that. But yeah, I mean, I get there sometimes though. I just think my rope is a bit longer or whatever.
You have a lot of patience with them. It's really beautiful.
Yeah. So mostly just like, all right, this is what we're doing right now. Okay. I did find myself getting into a state where I was getting kind of frustrated and being a little bit frustrated with him. And then I just realized one day, like, what am I doing? Like, if I walked around treating you like that, like just being frustrated with everything you did, or treating my friends like that, we wouldn't go very well for very long. And I was like, why am I doing that to my son? Like, he's doing his best, and I need to stop giving him that energy. Like, that's not okay. And so,
because at this age, one of the most important things that we recognize, because there's no manual for being a parent, and it's always shifting and always changing. The age that he's in now is he's really understands everything we say, but he's not able to communicate what he wants with words. And so he's just starting to have like little words now, which is really cool. And it was a lot of fun. Like he can say apple, and it's like, okay, you want an apple? And he's like, yeah. But over the last like 5-6 months, when he's like coming more online, he really understands what we're telling him and what we're saying, but he can't communicate what he needs to us. There's this miscommunication, or there's this frustration.
Sometimes he just likes saying a new word, like toast is one of his favorites. So I make him toast, and he doesn't actually want it. He just wanted to say toast. And I'm like, fuck, this is the amount of food I make him that doesn't get eaten, that then the amount of other food that he needs to eat. It's like a whole thing.
Especially when you're on a detox and he's eating all this food. It's like healthy, but it's like, we can't eat it. I'm like, oh, you're not eating it. And I'm usually I'll just snack right on it. Like, okay, as long as, it's like if you make food for Luke and he doesn't eat it, it's like we got dad as the garbage disposal, so it's all good. And I'm like, oh, what do we do with this?
I also see he's so cheeky feeding his food to Freedom sometimes. I looked over the other day and he was like, he had asked me to make him toast and I made it for him. And then I was doing something in the kitchen. I turned around and he was taking it out of his plate and putting it on the ground and he saw me and he was like, I was like, oh, you little shit. You know what you're doing. Stop that.
That face was so perfect.
Yeah. His little like, she called me. Yeah, no, it's intense sometimes. It really is. And I've got a newfound, I mean, I already respected all my full-time mama friends, but I've got an even newfound respect that comes through like the gnosis of having the lived experience. And I'm just like, wow. And like some of my dearest sisters who have been breastfeeding, the whole time as well, kids Luca's age, I'm like, wow, man, that's amazing. Like I had challenges with my breast milk from during that like 3 to 6 month period. And after 6 months, really haven't been breastfeeding him at all.
Do you want to talk about that a little bit? Because that was a really big confrontation with an inner story that you had, wanting to do the natural birth and obviously natural breast milk and have him connected to you in that way, and getting to a point where you just weren't producing enough milk and you had to confront, do I give him the bottle and the formula? Talk about that process and how challenging that was for you. Because I think that's one thing that not a lot of, it's going to really help, mothers or expecting mothers or mothers that are currently going through this, or mothers that have maybe gone through it and haven't processed it, because I don't think it's talked about the, wanting and desiring to breastfeed, but sometimes it's just not in the cards.
Yeah. And it's not something I knew about. I thought you kind of decided you chose to breastfeed or not. I didn't realize that it was actually not always easy. So yeah, I kind of, and it was light and day. When we gave Luca the bottle, it was like the first time we'd ever seen like a fully satisfied baby. So really from day one, he had just been like what we thought was a fussy baby, because I think he was just always hungry and not getting enough. And I always had trouble expressing. I could never really get much out. So I was never able to create any kind of surplus that you could feed him, or even just a surplus for us to have.
Do you think that was tied to the stress from the business and being so focused on that, as opposed to you had so much you were juggling at that time? This is just coming through, so I'm just curious.
It could be. I mean, it could be tied to that, like this sort of subconscious aspect of like breastfeeding's hard. I've got things to do, maybe, and like stress. I have breast implants. I don't know if that impacts it or not.
Whatever the variables, you got to a point where you really confronted and you were holding on to, I need to be able to breastfeed.
I really wanted to, and I had been doing all I could from a diet perspective, even eating a lot of things that I don't usually eat. I'd been drinking moringa tea, which really did help a lot. But still, I just wasn't able to get there. And then, he got to the point where he was dehydrated when we were up in Colorado and hadn't peed for however long it was. I can't remember now, but it was too long. And then there was a little bit of blood in his diaper from his pee. And we were like, okay, this is not, like, we can't keep going. And
what was that decision like? Because I remember that night, and I remember you really struggling and you looking at me, and I'll never forget the look in your eyes. You like, it was like you were holding on, and I don't know if there was judgment, but it was like you were looking at me to help you make this decision. And it was like, I felt like it wasn't my decision to make, and I was there to support you in the decision fully. And we were kind of in this tension.
Well, I remember though, it was hard because you did not want to give him formula either.
Yeah.
So there was that layer there that neither of us wanted to give him formula, and neither of us were making the decision. And then because it was my body that was not doing what it needed to do, I felt like a total failure. Like, oh my God, there's something wrong with me. I haven't done this right. I'm not doing it right. It's on me that we're going to have to poison our baby with formula. And Joe is expressing that kind of, that's how I felt. Like I was feeling that you were also disappointed, which is okay. to be disappointed for both of us. But yeah, I was looking to you to make the decision. We also had a couple of people staying in our house, and that was quite confusing because we were all talking about it and researching and Googling. Kat and Claudia there, remember? And, you know, everybody was just like sharing their ideas and their opinions and things like that. But like, I just knew in my heart, like, no, it's not working. Like, he needs something more. And I knew how hard I'd been trying as well since day one. Like how many times I had sat with that express machine for like 30 minutes and got nothing out or got a dribble out, and how many cups of moringa tea I drank, and how many different recipes I'd made for cookies and things that can improve your breast milk, and like everything that I had been trying for months. I just knew I'd reached that point. But at that moment, I didn't. Yeah, it was a part of my becoming. It was a part of my becoming a mother. I wasn't trusting myself. I wasn't trusting my intuition and my connection with him, because I have a very strong connection with him and I have very strong intuition, but I wasn't trusting myself. I wasn't just saying, yeah, cool, it's really nice, all the research you guys are doing. I really appreciate the support, but like, this is where we're at and I know it. I wasn't, because I was afraid that I was failing and I was being judged. I wasn't good enough and I hadn't done it right. And I beat myself up for a couple of days. And then I just remember driving back. We were in Colorado. I remember driving back from Whole Foods, probably Natural Grocer actually. Much prefer Natural Grocer. Driving back from Natural Grocer and just seeing it for what it was. I was like, you're beating yourself up. Doesn't help you. Doesn't help Luca. Doesn't help Joe. Doesn't help anyone. Like, it is what it is. And he is so much happier, so much more fulfilled. And I mean, looking at photos even, he was tiny, like, as in, he was always like a little bit bigger in height and things, but he had like sunken dark eyes because he just wasn't getting enough milk, and he immediately turned into this plump, happy, healthy baby. I mean, we had to use some shitty formula for a few days until we could get the good one from Europe, which is a whole other thing about the quality of formula. But we did only have to use that for a couple of days, and then we got onto a really good one that Kendamil. I think that's what it was.
Yeah, a little pointer. Like, the formula that they sell in the stores here is awful. Like, the number one ingredient was like high fructose corn syrup or some type of syrup that was fake and processed, and it was labeled organic, but not most of the ingredients.
Yeah, so we ended up finding, like, the best one you could buy here.
Yeah, we ended up finding a international. I think it was Sweden. They had
somewhere in Europe. Yeah.
Somewhere in Europe, they had this really nice formula that was a lot healthier ingredient stuff. That there's a lot different regulations in places like that for.
I believe there is a good one from Australia as well. There are two kind of that are. One from Europe and one from Australia, which I don't know the name of. But
if you have babies and you're interested, reach out to me and we'll find out the actual name of the product. And it ended up being a real gift, this happening, because, like you said, a lot of our friends, they're still breastfeeding, and it's hard for the father, to show up to support. Like, I didn't know how to support you when you were like just sleep deprived every 2 hours, having to feed, and him never being fully satisfied. So he's always like trying to get more milk from you, and so you're like haven't slept in months up to this point, and like there's nothing I could do, and like I try to support you, but it's like, can I get some rest as well so I have some energy in the morning, because like there's nothing I can do to show up. And as soon as we went to the formula, it was like, we can take turns, and I have a bottle, and you can
and
get rest.
He's just like a different baby.
Yeah, he's getting more satisfied, more fulfilled.
Like, he would have a feed and go to sleep and be chill, and it was. Oh, so much different. So
it was a real gift. Talk about the connection to your intuition as a mother and being able to trust that in a more connected way.
Yeah, I do trust it now. Like, and I think you're always in the moment where something's wrong and you're like, especially when they can't communicate a lot. But like, I get there pretty quick now. I'm like, no, like we had to take him to the urgent care last weekend, and I'd been watching what was happening for a day or two, and then I just knew when it was like no longer a maybe, like, no, he needs some help.
Yeah, he was in pain. He had a little something wrong with the tip of his penis, and he was constipated, and poor little guy, we got a little cream. And it's just interesting because when you go into the Western medical system, when we're questioning everything, and we can see the entire system and structure. The essence of it's to do good and to help support, but when it's so lost off the rails, it's hard to trust, and it's in place so that we can have access to it for things like Luca and getting a little ointment and cream to help support. But we're really like, how can we do this more naturally and
Yeah.
not get lost in the stories? Because even, there was some story that the doctor came in and said, oh, looks like there could be something wrong with his penis here. And it was like she was worried about telling us that there was this thing that could be wrong, and going into worry. And it's like, oh, that's interesting. Like, where does that come from? And end up being not what she said or what she thought. It was just the worst case scenario of like what this could mean. And so I feel like that's always a part of the
Well,
conversation.
yeah, and a lot of questions about his regular pediatrician and where are we up to with all these things. And, it's just like living in a different world where, our world is Luca's not sick, so he doesn't need to go to the doctor all the time.
Yeah, exactly.
And when he gets really sick, or if he gets really sick, we will deal with it. But I'm not having him at the doctor's every freaking 10 seconds getting weighed and measured and checked. And
let's talk about the way we're questioning reality in that way. And part of this ego death that you've gone through, this dissolution of a story, an aspect of who you are, and working on integrating that in, there's been this reawakening and remembering of different parts of you that are really connected to nature, connected to plants, connected to the earth, connected to food and where it comes from, and getting and diving into permaculture recently. So talk about that, and we'll get into the vision of Haven, which I haven't actually talked a lot about publicly, and I'm really excited to start bringing more energy into it and sharing it with the world so that we can really talk about what we're doing and really just learning and getting back to our roots of being human, of being connected to the earth and not being so separate. And there's just so much work that goes into breaking down these collective paradigms, the journey of doing your own healing and questioning your own stories, like we just shared with your journey of the entrepreneur. But then there's these collective paradigms that we're beginning to question and break down, which I think a lot of people are as well. And, just not sustainable where we're headed collectively as a society, as a culture, and our planet is running out of resources. And a lot of the systems that we've created are on shaky ground, and not in this doomsday way, but this calling of on our heart of like a remembering is what feels most resonant, a remembering of connecting with our food, connecting with the land, and not being so disconnected and isolated, which is the collective kind of narrative and paradigm that we lived in and how we're shifting through it. So talk about your connection to the plants, permaculture, and how that's really reawakened this remembering within you.
I feel like it started with kind of COVID and getting pregnant at the same time, and then being like in lockdown with you, or in your little house in...
God, I have some nostalgia for that. That was so fun.
But I started gardening again, It's the first time I'd really done it. I'd grown herbs a little bit over the years, but not much since I was a child. And I started remembering all these things that I knew. I also had like a full-on ayahuasca experience mid-2020 where I got downloaded like everything about plants, but I don't even know how to put words to that here. But basically in that 2020 year, I really started reconnecting with plants and gardening and growing our own food. And I got pregnant and I started looking into the healthcare system, and I'm immersed in remote work. So I'm looking at like work and commute offices, and start looking at the food system. And then I'm just basically looking at the finance system. I've got a finance background. All of a sudden I'm not in finance anymore. I'm looking at that and just going, holy shit, like it's all just, it's not right. It's just not right. And it's broken. And I don't want to live in that world anymore. Like I don't care for it anymore. I want to live. How so? I want to live as nature. I want to live in nature. I want to be surrounded by trees and the elements. I want to grow my own food. I want to primarily be able to eat what I've grown and trade with other people who have loved and nurtured and grown their own food. I want to honor the elements. I want to embrace ceremony. I don't want to live in a system and a society that is so filled with mental health issues and other health issues, and everybody is just on the treadmill.
Yeah, it's fascinating how we have this mental health crisis, this obesity crisis, and all of these epidemics that are really just showing how unhealthy we are as a culture and as a society. And we're always looking to create these things to help people with their mental health and help people, whether it's pharmaceuticals or even different ways of like, hey, let's break the stigma. Let's talk about our mental health. And what's really missing in that conversation, and I don't mean to laugh at mental health, but widening the perspective of why are we mentally ill?
Yeah.
And
it's because of the way we're living and
separating the mind and from everything. There's this, if we start taking a holistic approach and understanding the entire organism, the four main bodies, the physical body, the mental body, the emotional body, the spiritual body, all of them need to be in alignment and be able to connect with and process. So it's not just isolated mental health. There's a whole thing, and you look at the entire paradigm we're coming out of, the Newtonian, reductionist, physical reality, this belief structure that if we can't measure it, it doesn't exist.
Yeah, I don't want to live in that world anymore. I want to live in my magical world because I literally can channel Kundalini energy up my spine just right now. Like it's there, it's magical. I can feel things, I can sense things, I can connect with things. I don't want to live in a world where that's not real, where we pretend that that's not real and we have to be able to see it and touch it and measure it.
Yeah, but we're told in this society, this paradigm, that isn't real. And I mean, even you, right? You've shared with me before that you had that deeper connection spiritually at a younger age, and then you kind of stifled it and you forgot, and you developed this story of, oh, if I'm going to fit into this society and receive love, which is the thing I want, I have to actually put all that down in the background and focus on becoming a successful business person.
And that's the thing. I mean, I played the game, I figured out the game, I did it. Then I realized it was a stupid game, and I'm really glad to be out of the game.
Yeah, but I mean, it's a stupid game, but it's the game we live in. So how do we move through it? Like, where are we headed, and what needs to be done in order to shift? Because it's not just us going and living on the land and like saving ourselves. It's this, to fully understand we are all one, and to really embody that and connect with that. It's not this, that's dumb and everybody can kind of continue to do that and we'll just go do our own thing. There's this natural, when the awakening process happens, this desire to support the collective awakening of all, because we are all one organism, and to fully realize that it's a great responsibility, and it's not this isolation. So, getting back to learning about permaculture, and then us having, we bought a property about over a year ago, 75 acres, 90 minutes outside of town. And the desire is to get back to the land. And when we first bought it, there was definitely a subtle frequency of like, there's this global pandemic, all of this stuff is being revealed, and it can be pretty chaotic. And there's this doomsday apocalyptic frequency of fear that is blanketing the planet. How are we going to survive if something really goes on? Like, let's buy some land, grow our own food. And as the world's opened back up, it's really fascinating just tapping into how much of a distant memory that feels like, when it felt like it was never going to end. It just like, we're back into the busyness of life, and there's no spaciousness, and everything's going. And even someone like me and yourself, and we're really aware, grounded. There's like, I feel every day I get lost in the story, because there's this collective field in the city and in our country specifically. I remember when I went down to Peru a couple months ago, one of the first things I recognized is how the frequency, just being in the US, creates this desire of, I need to get to the next promotion, get the next paycheck, get the next job, be better. There's people that are, comparing myself to people that are ahead of me, in the idea of society and this ladder. When I went to Peru, the collective frequency was like a lot more laid back. And I'm talking about the actual frequency geographically of where I landed. I could feel it. And it was really fascinating. And coming back, like, I have my business that I want to support people in this process of self-discovery, and all the things I'm doing is to really help support this great collective awakening. But the subtleties of getting like lost in, like, if I'm doing it in the same field, in the same way that I'm trying to break out of, it's the fascinating thing of this cycle and this loop that we get stuck in, even when we think we're doing good work. And what we're realizing is the only way to really do it, and the only way to find deeper levels of real freedom and sovereignty, and it starts with you control a population, you control the food supply. And it's really fascinating to really get to that root and you understand like the seeds and the value of seeds, because we all need to eat. And if a population, you can't feed a population, like that's the fastest way to anarchy and revolution and like chaos, really. And so you just look at the stories of, we're so blinded with all these different shiny objects in the realm of money. And it really comes back to, if we can grow our own food, we actually don't need to rely on the system. And then we can be more sovereign, and then we can cultivate the land. And then wait, what is this story of, why do I give so much power to a governmental structure? Like the government is supposed to govern us as an entity, but it's for the people. And we've lost that. It's been flipped into this fear of I am scared of my government, and therefore I'm going to do what I'm told in this system. And to break out of that is the most courageous act any of us can go on. And it takes a level of curiosity and embodiment. It's not just I want to do this. And that's the journey we're on, is really continuing to do the work, to learn, to grow, and to let go of everything we've been taught and told in all the ways, not just in the societal structures we've created, but the spiritual teachings that we've done, and the collective psychological stories that are so ingrained in our society and culture. Is this really, really deep work, and finding comfort and empowerment and confidence as we start reconnecting with the frequency of the plants, and feeling like the allyship and the support of plants, and the frequency that nature has for supporting us and calling us back into it. It's almost like the universe is really calling us into this deeper remembering. And it's like so beautiful.
It is. Yeah, plants are so amazing. I mean, and I think that's what I was getting at, is just like the switch has kind of flipped and I feel like that was the big thing, right? My need for love, I needed to stay in the system at some level because I thought that that's how I was loved. And so that opening that happened for me was kind of like, I can just feel myself moving so much more toward what I know to be true for me. And that's, moving out to Haven and living with more sovereignty and, being open to anything. Like we may decide to go live in another part of the world that has a different frequency at some point, because there are frequencies in different places and they are different. And ultimately, I think the greatest service I can do is to embody it as wholly as possible and know that that's going to have a ripple effect and that's going to be shared with the world around me.
What are you learning about permaculture right now?
Yeah, I was going to say, I know you want me to talk about permaculture. Yeah, it's amazing. So I did my permaculture design course with Austin Permaculture Guild, and then I just did a 3-day Permaculture 101 course out at Aubrey Marcus's land out in Lockhart, and that was amazing as well. So just getting really excited about regenerating our land at Haven. The things that I love about permaculture, so for anyone who is unfamiliar, permaculture is shortening for permanent agriculture, but it's really about not only sustainable but also regenerative farming and food production. And not just that, but goes into living as well. How do we live? How do we approach everything in a way that we actually understand that we are all connected, we are all one, and everything has an impact and an effect? And how can we create as much of like a closed loop system where things are not just being wasted? We're not bringing things in all the time. We're actually using the resources that we have at hand to deal with the situations that we have here, and we're conserving and cultivating something. And the thing I love about permaculture is how, like for me anyway, the way I experience it is very free and there's not a lot of rules. There's some principles around permaculture, but when I think about industrial agriculture, I see very perfect precision lines and, machinery, and everything is like, it feels like it's an exact science and a lot to figure out if you're going to get it right or not. And even the traditional gardening that maybe I learned as a child was a little bit more like that, like things in perfect rows and stuff like that. But permaculture is really about how much can we emulate nature. And when we look at nature, it's really not super perfect. You look at the Amazon jungle and it's just alive, and there could be like giant tree growing right next to another giant tree, and like that's not planted exactly 6 feet apart or whatever it needs to be in like our perfect humanized system. So I love the permaculture thought process around like just try things, and if it doesn't work out, it doesn't matter. Like observe, what did you learn, what can you do to improve it, and you're constantly just improving what it is that you're cultivating. And I also really value the closed loop system. Like how, when we think of Haven, we have 73 acres, almost 75 acres out there. We have a 5-acre lake. We're very wooded. We have tons of trees. Like there is a lot of resources already existing on that piece of land. How do we do as much as we can without having to bring stuff in? How do we use all of the trees that went down in the latest freeze that we had and mulch them and use that for mulch in our garden versus bringing in a truckload of mulch? And as we go forward, how do we continue to create more of that? How do we collect the grey water out of the washing machines that's actually really good in the garden, provided you use the right detergents and things that are not toxic, because it's got more microbes and more bacteria that actually helps replenish the soil. So instead of just sending that all off into
the ocean,
or into our septic system, as it were, out at Haven, why don't we water the garden with it? Why don't we collect all the rain that falls on the roofs and water the garden with that? Why don't we get the spill that's happening from our current lake that goes off our land and pump that back up to the highest point and put that into the trees there so that they can thrive more? So how do we do all of that? How do we build land? They call it earthworks, but basically moving the land a little bit around so that the water retention in the land naturally from rainfall is higher. So it's not just running off. If we do that, we start to recharge the aquifers under the ground that serves all of humanity. How do we do all of these things? How do we create rich, thriving microclimates? When we start to do this, it changes the actual weather and the climate and what happens on that piece of land, because microclimates are real. You know, you stand in the shade of a tree and it's cooler than in the sun. So you think of that kind of, I don't know, on steroids, for lack of a better word. You're creating carefully these kind of microclimates where things can thrive because of where things are placed. And all of a sudden you have much more life force and much more richness. And ultimately, the old way of farming, when you think of a farm that's in a children's storybook, even in Luca's storybooks, Old MacDonald had a farm, and Old MacDonald has donkeys and cows and chickens and pigs, and he has a bunch of vegetables and all sorts of things, right? But farming at this point, in this country especially, has gotten to a point where it's monocrop. It's a corn farm and that's it. Mm-hmm. It's a soybean farm and that is it. That is detrimental. It has killed the soil. There is no like life in that soil.
And why is that? Why does it kill the soil to do a monocrop?
Firstly, you're removing all of the other diversity and exposing a lot of the soil. So everything is pulled back. The soil is tilled, which aerates it. And then the crops are planted, and then chemicals in the form of herbicides and pesticides and fertilizers are poured all over it, which kills all of the bacteria that should be living and alive, and all the little bugs and everything that needs to be living and alive in the soil. Plants need biodiversity. They need pollinators, butterflies, bees to come along. When you have a monocropped field, you don't have any diversity, and all of those chemicals on top, and all of a sudden there's no bugs, there's no bees, there's no butterflies, there's no birds. And so there's no bird shit going into the ground, which spreads seeds, which adds to fertilizer. There's the worms are not there aerating the soil. That's why they have to keep tilling it. And essentially the soil's just dead, and the water is not being retained in that soil because it's all exposed. Another thing about, if you look in nature, take a stroll in any more natural environment, the soil is never exposed. Nature always covers itself. You know, there's always grass or small shrubs or little like cover crops growing, clover, whatever it might be. You really never see a piece of open soil. And if you do, it won't be there for long. You know, maybe it happened because of a fire or some flood event or something, but nature will revitalize itself and it'll come back to life. So when we're doing this farming where every single year we completely take all the crops out, or maybe it's even every season depending on the crop, the soil is bare and then we till it and then we plant it again, the runoff, the rain, none of the rain is getting in, none of the water is absorbing into that soil and being retained. So we need way more water to produce those crops. They're constantly having to water them. And the amount of chemicals and fertilizers that it takes to produce those crops is like something like 10 times or 50 times what it was when they first started using fertilizers and chemicals. If you can imagine having a thriving typical farm, a biodiverse farm, and everything's going great, there's tons of fruit and food and vegetables and animals and everything. And then one year you come along and you go, whoa, found this really cool pesticide, and you spray it all over everything. The next year, you're probably going to have a bumper crop because you just killed this certain bug or whatever that was bothering you for a year, and all of a sudden everything grows. But the year after that, there's an impact that bug is gone. You've got less biodiversity. And then the year after that and the year after that. And so they keep adding more chemicals and more herbicides and fungicides and pesticides to kill everything. I mean, you mentioned glyphosate, which is in Roundup. If you look it up to buy it, it's an indiscriminate weed killer, which means it kills everything. So think about that. It tells you, be careful because this kills anything that you put it on. And we're using that in everywhere. It's literally seeped into our soil and our water system at this point. So even organic produce, it's like only so far you can take it. It's like all this stuff is freaking logical, but there's a lot of money to be made selling that, and marketing efforts, and a really good story that this stuff isn't really that bad and don't worry about it, and people just turn a blind eye. And
yeah, when it's our incentive structure is money,
yeah,
it erodes the very fabric of what we're doing collectively. And I was with someone the other day who's had a really good point on this, and he was talking about, and I'm probably not going to say it as eloquently as him, but he was talking about, humans have been telling stories since the beginning of time, since we first started sitting around a fire. And stories are such a powerful part of our culture, of our psyche, of how we learn, of how we pass down information. And because the incentive structure is money, our best storytellers have gone to the dark side, so to speak, because that's where the money is. And these big corporations, in the form of marketing, which is just storytelling, the best storytellers who are getting paid the most money are in a paradigm in a society of that's where I'm valued the most. And so they're telling stories from the frequency of fear.
Yeah.
And because of that, the collective is following these stories and attached to these stories. And the way he was saying, which is really beautiful, because you look at how do we solve these collective issues? And there's a lot of different lenses. And this is the first time I've heard this, is really telling better stories and getting the best storytellers to wake up and start telling those better stories, because that's what the society needs on a very foundational level. Another thing I think that I'm really passionate about bringing back, that I think you can really point to a lot of the issues we're facing collectively, is the lack of rite of passage experiences, especially for young boys into manhood around the age of puberty. And these tribes and ancient cultures and civilizations and indigenous tribes from all over the world had a rite of passage experience to go through a psychological death rebirth process, pretty much going from a boy into a man and having a mature, healthy adult psyche and being treated that way and making a good human. We don't have those in our society and culture. The last rituals we really have is marriage and the ceremony of a wedding. And I think that's why people are so attached to getting married so quickly, because there's this desire to have that sacred space and that sacred connection and the ceremonial experience that is lacking so much in our society and culture. And so there's another angle there. And then the food system. Or the
fear of getting married because it's the only ritual that anyone's ever considered. And so it's so scary.
Yeah. Are you scared of marriage?
Oh, no, I've been married twice. No, but I mean, there's both, right? There's rushing into it, and then there's the fear of those commitments and things like that exist out there. And I think that's because we don't have a relationship with, what I would relate to is a fear of being a mother. Like, I just never wanted to do that. But I didn't, now I understand, I'm like, oh, I was a girl and then I was a maiden and now I'm a mother and then I will initiate into my crone phase as well. And like, this is my natural cycle of
Life
life.
is cyclical.
Doesn't mean you have to birth a child to become that mother to make that transition. But it is a transition.
But there's an initiation to the
but I didn't have an initiation from girlhood to maiden. No, I had an initiation from girlhood to
drug dealer.
Well, to the masculine though, to the toxic masculine. I became the man of the house essentially.
And I think that's really, if you look at the collective psyche or the collective consciousness and the real core wound that is being healed right now, that has kept us trapped and in this state of greed, power, and fear and guilt, is this unhealthy, immature, masculine force that is running our culture and society. And it's, I think how many people have a relatable story to me and my connection with my dad. And there's uniqueness to it, but there's also this collective, like, why did you desire so much to find success and achievement? It's because you wanted to be seen, heard, accepted, loved by your
my
father.
Dad. Yeah.
And me, I became one of the best athletes in the world and made it all the way to the pinnacle, making millions of dollars because I wanted my dad to love me, accept me, see me. And when I let go of that and I got to a place where it's like, oh, he doesn't. And I don't blame him for that, because what I'm speaking to is it's a collective wound that every father, unless they actually look at that and they're in the paradigm and they're in the program of, creating safety and working and sacrificing family time for money so that you can put it. It's like all of those things are like the sacrifice. It's the good thing. It's what they were taught how to love. And but it's not that loving presence. It's not that healthy masculine of like, hey, like, you don't have to do anything to earn my love. I just love you for who you are. And I think that when I've connected and worked with the plants and plant medicine and a lot of these deeper healing processes of reconnecting with that frequency of, okay, God, I don't need anything to prove my love to God. I am because I am. And I feel that love now, but I have to find that love within myself. And if I'm searching for it from my dad because I never received it from my dad, then that's going to create this cycle of I need to fill that void outside of myself. And so as we go through individually this healing process of that collective father wound, the individual father wound will begin to heal that collective father wound. But there is a lot of work to be done.
Yeah, it is. I'm so grateful for my mom, because as you're speaking, I knew my mom loved me no matter what. I always felt her unconditional love no matter what choices I made. And she had a really beautiful way of expressing that she didn't necessarily agree with the way that I was going about things, but that she loved me and she was there and she would support me. And that, she was always available for me. And, I'm really grateful for that. And I want to embody that as a parent, because I think that is so important, to show that unconditional love and to break down this, this story, this need to prove ourselves to get love goes very well with kind of the parts of capitalism that are destructive. It feeds into each other, where
consumerism, fill in the void with stuff.
And earn more and work really hard. And, I think about like the commute. Thank God that's not like such a thing anymore. I hope it's not for so many people, but like,
sadly, I think it is.
Might be. Yeah. I'm thinking about imagining like you're living in this tiny little apartment in New York City and you're getting up every morning and commuting on the train and being on the subway and being advertised to, and you're wearing your really expensive heels and your really nice handbag, and you're being advertised to of like the next handbag that you should buy and the next pencil skirt and the next whatever, and you're going to your office and getting pay rises and promotions to earn more money so that on your commute you can wear better shoes. And it's like, what the actual, like,
it's insatiable.
It's insatiable and it's meaningless. Like you're having a fancy handbag to be seen, like going on a subway and getting to your office every day where you sit still for 10 plus hours and wreck your body.
I think that's a great point. I mean, you can point to one of the biggest issues we're facing as a species is the lack of meaning in our lives. and you want to look at the mental health crisis and obesity problem and why we overeat and we're over medicated is because we don't have purpose and meaning and a connection to the thing that is greater than the self, the individual self, the great I am, which is what connects us all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I find that in the garden, in my plants. Just love it because it just reminds me, I learn every day, and it reminds me that, everything has a season, everything is connected, everything is innately intelligent. The fact that you put a little seed in the ground and it knows how to sprout up and open, wow, that's amazing.
How much? I mean, that's just that alone has been teaching me indirectly because I haven't been as connected to the plants. But you're popping these little seedlings in the kitchen. You have your little light, and for me, just to walk by them and see them grow, and I go give them a little love. I tickle them so that they can feel held and supported, and they're going. And we have this avocado too. You add literally a seed out of an avocado, and you learned that there's little screws in it so that it sits.
Most people use toothpicks, but
toothpicks. But it sits in this little mason jar of water, about 70% dipped in the water, and she just sat it there. And over the last I think it's probably been 6 weeks, maybe more. It's cracked open, and there's literally a root coming out, and it's so slow. Mm-hmm. It's happening just painstakingly slow, but over time, I pick it up, and I'm like, oh my God! I look into it, I'm like, it's literally what is that? There's a life force in this seed that is calling itself to blossom into the very blueprint that it has within its fabric of its frequency and information. All it needed was water. Yeah. And it activated the information that there's something in me that needs to become the fullest realized potential of this avocado tree. And as that avocado tree takes shape and we plant it and it grows, it's going to give birth to how many avocados?
Thousands
of avocados.
Every year.
One seed. I mean, that's what abundance is.
That's what abundance is. All of this new age spiritual stuff about abundance and getting in the frequency.
People just want more money.
Honestly, go and plant a seed.
Yeah.
And that, last year, I had tried to plant cilantro the year before. It didn't work. Tried it in a new spot last year. Worked great. Had a beautiful cilantro plant, tons of cilantro, and then it bolted, went to seed, and I dried it. I collected a huge jar full of seeds, but also in the drying process, those seeds just dispersed and spread across our yard. And this year, we had about 50 cilantro plants that just popped up, and we had so much cilantro, plus the whole thing of seeds that I actually just sprinkled on our other house, and I'll take some out to Haven just to see what happens, but I also cook with them. I'm like, that one cilantro seed, I think it was a seedling that I first planted, has taught me so much and helped me deconstruct my stories about money so hard, because that's what true prosperity and abundance is. It's in nature. It's in the plants. It's in the giving nature of this world that we are provided for. The story that before all of this civilization, it was terrible and you were running around just trying to survive and not get killed by a lion or something. I don't think it's real. I think we were sold a lie. We had everything, and we had a relationship with everything. And, our civilization, we also had to create a story that the indigenous people were not as smart and not as whatever, and we had to civilize them and colonialize them. Yeah. And now many of us are starting to see, whoa, they are the wisdom keepers. They actually knew and know what is up.
And I'm so grateful for those wisdom keepers and the medicine carriers, and being connected with the plant medicine and the ceremony and the ritual of some of these different cultures, and those that faced oppression and genocide, really, like the Native Americans, complete genocide of their way of being and their beliefs, and the fact that we came and just wiped them out and took them off their land and forced disconnection. You guys got to follow our way. And they have so much wisdom. There's nothing, it's been so profound to sit in teepee ceremonies with peyote in a traditional Native American way, and realizing as I sit around this fire and eat this medicine and pray into this fire all night, and the discipline that requires, this is what these people have been doing for thousands of years, like no telling how long. And you could feel the tradition of that. And those that held it down and embodied the courage to keep anchored into these old ancient ways, and to see that them carrying that torch, getting us to this point where we have this opportunity to integrate these old ways of being into our advanced technological world of all of these opportunity to create abundance for all with the systems that we've created. But that requires, what is real abundance? It's the connection, like these stories with the plants. It's like like the new age thing. I think it's so fascinating where, I mean, and I get stuck in this too. So it's just to look at this story of using these spiritual concepts to call in more money, because we think abundance is financial wealth.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been confronting that in a very real way recently with, I made $13 million during my career, and, half that went to taxes. I had, like $4 million in the bank, and I felt safe. And I had understanding about money where I'll never have to work again. I can live off the interest, and I can live in my van the rest of my life. And like, that's good. But I've been on this path of, through different investment things, that I've been called to it. That's a scarcity frequency of thinking I need to accumulate wealth so that I can feel safe, because I can always draw from this source. And what I've been called through my connection with spirit is that there's this infinite source, literally infinite source, God source energy that permeates all. It's the thing that permeated that avocado to come to life, like that energy, being able to connect with that. And if I'm relying on a source and a bank account, and I'm not trusting that fully, then no matter how big that bank account is, I'm not really feeling safe.
Yeah.
And that's why people continue to make their big bank accounts bigger and bigger, and they can never really get enough. And I got to a point where I was like, okay, that's enough. And then I'm being called to say, okay, it's about what is it really about? What is real abundance? It's getting back to the land and growing our own food. And then you paint the picture of, Monsanto and why they have all these patents on all the seeds, and they control the food. I never really understood that until I started confronting all these stories and how it's all connected. It's like, oh, you control the food supply, you control the seeds, you control people being disconnected from that. Then there's this scarcity frequency, fear, worry, guilt, and all the things that come off of it.
Yeah. I mean, even learning to forage, because there is food just out there for you, just growing. And it's funny because if you start looking that up on Google, it'll tell you to be so careful because it might be so dangerous and, whatever. But like, food grows everywhere. There's so much more that
Talk about the onions that you cooked in the dinner the other night.
Yeah, I was walking along on a little hike with Luca, and he actually found these little wild onions. And I was like, awesome. So we picked some of them and took them home, and I cooked them up for dinner. It was amazing.
They were so good. They were really like, the smell of them.
Yeah,
it was just like, they're really good.
Yeah. There's here in Austin, Texas, and probably other parts of the country, there's a weed, as we term it, which really, weeds are just pioneer plants. They're the ones that pop up the first to cover the soil when some event happens that the soil is uncovered. So there's a pioneer plant here called chickweed, and it's all over our back garden. It's really pretty. And you'll remember one morning I made myself an avocado and chickweed salad because I just learned that, you can eat that. You can eat dandelions. You can eat so many things that are just growing. It's growing your own food, also knowing that nature provides. There's just a lot of power in all of that and connecting with it. And I think it's important for people to know what has happened to seeds and to food. And to understand that what you are looking at in the grocery store is a fraction of a percent of what food is actually available out there. I mean, there could be hundreds, maybe, I don't even know, hundreds, thousands, different types of tomatoes that can grow in the world, hundreds of types of apples, hundreds of types of anything, not to mention all the fruits and foods and different plant leaf structures and things that are not even sold in our supermarkets. But we're so used to like Roma tomatoes, steak tomatoes, and the cherry tomatoes, and that's what you get. And then we have, little tiny potatoes and the big fat ones. And then we have 2 types of sweet potatoes. And, it's like so limited what we actually eat.
Yeah.
So
we see the red pepper, the yellow pepper, and the green pepper.
One,
and those are the peppers.
Yeah. And there's probably thousands of
different. And they all look perfect.
Yeah.
all lined up there in the supermarket. Yeah. Like, how do they do that?
So just knowing that like any one piece of food that you identify with, there's probably hundreds of variations of that out there. But most of what's in the supermarkets is genetically modified, just a couple of strains that go hand in hand with a certain types of herbicides and pesticides. And the whole thing is.
And full circle, this is why we talked about with the detox that we're doing at the beginning of the show. Yeah, and even though a lot of those, it's a lot of people, the story of like, I'm eating healthy, I'm eating these natural foods, I'm even eating organic, but we're at a point now where our soil is so fucked that all of that food that's genetically modified or just put in and it looks perfect, it looks colorful and it looks healthy, is still lacking the nutrients that our bodies really need. And I mean, just going through this experience the last 5 days and taking these nutrient dense shakes and these different amino acids that our body, like building blocks of life that our food is supposed to have in it, and how satiated I feel, how more energy I feel, how much little pain and inflammation I feel. It's like, holy cow. I thought I was eating healthy.
Yeah.
And you look at the standard American diet and it's just holy cow.
Just look at how many things are in packets in a grocery store. I mean, that's one thing that is big time shifting. We already ate really well. We already ate a lot of fresh fruit and vegetables every week. But obviously at the start of this week when we did the cleanse, I went to the grocery store and I filled up the entire cart with fresh fruit and vegetables. There was nothing in a packet because we're not eating anything in a packet. And it was different from how the usual.
Yeah, I love like granola or like healthier chips, like these Siete chips with avocado oil. Like there's all these like healthier options, but they all have a process.
Yes.
So anything that has a process, we're not eating at all. And then even the fruit and vegetables, washing it with baking soda, because even organic vegetables through the process of whether being close to a farm that's non-organic and the glyphosates in the air, or the fact that it's in all of our water or in transportation, or being in the fruit next to the non-organic food, and how much glyphosate's in the air that there's having to wash our organic food still to try and get the poison off of it. It's blowing my mind, and really connecting with the actual experience of the connection to how it's affecting me is really fascinating. And we're just getting started on it. So, whoa.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I'm just going to go out on a limb and say, because you kind of asked about how do we actually change this. I think the most powerful thing anyone could do at this point is start growing food, start their own regenerative farm. That's obviously extreme, but go and visit, work on, volunteer, be on a regenerative farm. Like, do it for a day. Like, just change your world, change your perspective, see for your own self how far we have come in our society from, our food sources, and it will change the way you're thinking, the way you're seeing things.
Yeah. Be curious, be open, and be patient with yourself, because this is deep, deep work. And when you start going down this path, you really confront judgment, regret, guilt for being lied to, and
naivety.
Yeah. And so being patient and forgiveness, radical forgiveness for all of it. I want to mention, is there an opportunity for people to get involved in what we're doing out at Haven? I know we have a Telegram group. Is that something we should share with people to grow that community? And I feel really called to, because there's probably people here like, how do I get involved? Like, how do I get more connected to land, and even just the energy of it? And we have a Telegram group that's starting to grow, and it's with our close community here. And what we want to do is, as this vision comes to life, we're moving out there actually in a couple months, and we're remodeling the house, and it's been a whole labor of love and resources and challenge and up and downs and all this stuff. But we're getting towards the finish line of actually being able to move out there and start really putting our energy into the land. And we want it to be, we see it as a community gathering, experiential place so that we can all learn to come back to the land. And it's not just us, it's how are we learning and how are we sharing that information with more people. And so what we'll do is we'll share a link in the show notes to join that Telegram. And that Telegram is a part of our wider community. And what we'll do is share information on, if you're local, we're going to be doing working days out there, but we'll also start sharing more information about what we're doing and how we're cultivating the land and what we're learning about. And we're also going to be facilitating retreat experiences out there and sharing the land and the place to offer experiences of healing and deeper self-discovery, so that we are doing our part in really cultivating and shifting this in embodying this journey into a new paradigm.
Mm-hmm.
And it really is a frequency, and letting go of the frequency of fear, guilt, doubt, shame, worry, all of these things, and being in the presence of love, of presence, and reconnecting with nature are all a part of that journey. And so if you feel called and want to learn more, there's going to be a link in the show notes, Telegram channel.
Yeah, and we can share the website once it goes live.
We're working on a website, and we're going to be doing a bunch of retreats.
Retreat center out there, and people can rent that space for their own retreats. Eventually, we will have a community living out there. We plan to live out there with around 20 families, and we'll have other accommodation like RV accommodation and small tiny home-esque little accommodation village. And then we'll have the whole entire place is a regenerative permaculture farm and food forest. Retreats that we'll put on, and lots of working days. So this is a collaborative, collective process, and we're hosting one this Sunday, and again next Sunday, a permaculture day where we're building our first garden. But whenever I host those days, I'm calling for people who want to come out and experience it and volunteer, their time. But at the same time, I'll be sharing what I'm learning and transferring that knowledge and that wisdom. So stay tuned for that as well. Amazing.
This has been great.
Yeah.
I hope everyone else out there watching and listening enjoyed this as much as I did.
Thanks for having me.
How you feeling? Good. That was fun, right?
Yeah, it was great. We talked about a lot of things.
Yeah, we crushed it. That was a fucking great conversation.
Sure was.
I was really amazed where we went there.
Yeah. Thanks for being curious with me.
Still. Oh, yeah. I mean, I learned some stuff about you that I hadn't. I mean, some of the stories you've told me multiple times, and how much I do know about you, and especially some of your deeper wounds and how that's shaped some of the internal stories you have, and being able to dive deeper into understanding that more in a curious way was really beautiful.
I love you.
I love you so much. I'm so grateful for you. And it feels good to be in a space of deep connection. I know in this journey of life and relationship, there's an oscillation of partnership, and this, especially in a family dynamic, it's we got myself, I got you, I got our relationship, I got Lukey, I got my relationship with Lukey, and then the family
freedom
dynamic
as well.
Freedom takes a lot of my energy. And I'm just trying to give her love. I feel bad for her. She's
got a lot of wounds.
And she was daddy's girl for a couple of years. She's still daddy's girl, but now I have this whole family, and it's so cute when we're all together. I love it so much.
Me too.
Yeah. Thanks, babe.
Thank you.
Appreciate you. And thank you all for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I'm excited to hear what people think, because this blew my mind. I'm excited to re-listen to it. There's just a lot of value and a lot of beautiful storytelling, and a lot of inspiration. So if you enjoyed this podcast and you think, as you're watching it, someone popped into your awareness like, oh, they need to hear this, or this would help support them in any type of way, go ahead and share this episode with them. If you feel called to support, the best way to do that is leave a 5-star review. I know a lot of people say that, and I've asked some of my best friends, say, hey, just leave a review because it really helps the show. And I only have like 12 of them or something. So I only have 12 friends. If you want to be my friend, go leave a 5-star review. Just be authentic. It'll take just a couple minutes and just really share how this podcast impacted your life. And I think that's it. I love y'all. Peace.